Welcome, everybody. I would like to, at this time, call the meeting to order. And Commissioner Diaz will lead us in the salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. I believe at shortly, sometime today, Assemblymember Shirley Weber and Senator Ben Allen will be joining the Instructional Quality Commission meeting. In January, the Speaker of the Assembly appointed Assemblymember Weber, and in June, the Senate Rules Committee appointed Senator Ben Allen. Regarding the agenda today, I want to reiterate that at this September 19th through 20th meeting, the IQC will not be making any action on the Ethnic Studies model curriculum. If anyone is here to give public comment on ethnic studies, it is an item on tomorrow's agenda. We will, however, take public comment on it today. It will be the last item of the day, item 6B. For those giving public comment, in order to ensure that there is time for speakers to be heard, we're asking that you cooperate and adhere to these practices. Members of the public may sign up to address the IQC committee during the time allocated for such public comment. Speakers will be assigned to give public comment in the order that they've signed up and may be given a number card. When called upon to speak, speakers identify their name and the organization that they represent, if any. Members of the public may only sign up to speak for themselves and may not sign up to speak for others. Speakers will be allotted a 1 minute per speaker window. Speakers may not provide comment on behalf of another individual or group who's not present, and speakers may not allocate their time to another speaker. Speakers shall refrain from using profanity and shall conduct themselves in a respectful manner. Individuals not complying will be asked to leave the meeting room. No signs allowed inside of this meeting room. And next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for our last meeting. Okay, so you have the minutes of the May 6th, 2019 IQC teleconference meeting before you. If you have substantive changes, please present them now. And if there are minor changes not affecting the content, grammar, spelling, punctuation, please submit them to the staff. So we're going to take a few minutes to review the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. And is there a second?
I second.
Thank you so much. So Commissioner Munoz has moved and Commissioner Murphy-Corwin has seconded. Is there any discussion on this motion? Any public comment? Okay, then I'd like to call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, then the motion passes. Okay. At this time, I'm going to give a brief report of the chair. Part of our job as commissioners, in addition to reviewing and updating curriculum and frameworks, is to share some of these developments with the field. And so to that end, there's been a lot to share by way of the new dashboard app, which I've shared with my own district, and I know that other schools have shared with their respective districts, especially when we're looking at school site council work and working on our LCAP, right? Just seeing where we are, our strengths, WASC as well was mentioned, and that's absolutely correct. And where our areas are for growth as schools, as educators. And so there's that piece. I know that personally, me myself, I was involved in the ELD framework, the history, the science, and all of those are coming to fruition. And so the textbooks, the learning, how it affects our students, how it affects our teachers, all of that is being reflected. And we're actually coming around full circle when we're talking about math and that coming back up again. And so it's really exciting to see the iterative process of the growth that we're going through. And so I wanted to make a little comment on that too. And so that's been really encouraging. What else? Looking at CTE pathways and college and career readiness, especially in our secondary schools. That's been a big topic, and I know that an area that a lot of us are looking at in in California, Northern and Southern California. And so there's that too. And then overarching, making sure that our students are supported, right? In a multi-tiered, systematic way, that they are healthy and that they are well-balanced individuals who are prepared when we graduate them. And so all of that is part of the work that we've been doing, and that's it. and more, but that's just a quick summary. And so at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Gregson for her report.
Well, thank you, Chair Chow. I appreciate that. So as some of you may know, I was appointed to Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction on May 31st of this year, so it's only been a few months. And my branch is the Instruction and Measurement branch. And our branch includes 5 divisions. So we have the Assessment Division, which houses our CASP, the California Science Assessment, the LPAC, the English Learner Proficiency Exam, and then we have our Accountability Division that houses the dashboard and all of the behind the scenes around the California accountability system. We have an Education Data Management Division, which works with CalPADS. And so some of you who are working with special education know the CaseMIS system is now being integrated into CalPADS. So that is a division that's leading that work in partnership with Special Education Division. I also have the Improvement and Accountability Division, which focuses on the Title I monitoring and support for all of our schools. And I also have the Curriculum Frameworks and Instructional Resources Division because I couldn't give that up at all. And historically, Seaford has not been in the same branch as assessment or accountability and improvement and data management. And this move was done to build that organizational capacity that will equip CDE to support California schools with our superintendent's priorities, which include promoting statewide literacy, reducing chronic absenteeism, closing the achievement gap, and preparing students to enter the jobs for tomorrow, so 21st century skills. And many of the root causes and challenges that our students and teachers face can be supported through high quality, effective first instruction that is universally designed to reach each and every one of our students, which is the foundation of the Instructional Quality Commission's work and of Seaford's work. So how could we not have curriculum, instruction, assessment, and accountability integrated together and working together? So it's been very exciting because my division directors have already been looking at how do we integrate and work together and all this, and we've already seen some really great things come out of it. So it's very exciting. So with that, we are searching for a new director of the Curriculum Frameworks and Instructional Resources Division. So you are stuck with me as executive director through November. We'll do that transition in January with a new director and new executive director. So I have a few little highlights I want to make for you. The 2019 California Assessment Conference is happening in Oakland. First time ever we're having an assessment conference. It's very exciting. It's going to be held at the Oakland Convention Center on October 16th through 18th. And this is a really unique opportunity for classroom teachers to explore connections between assessments and classroom instruction and learn how to utilize assessment tools and resources to support teaching and learning. We're going to have 5 of our California science teachers who've been highlighted in different videos. They're award winners. They're going to be presenting, so other educators are going to be able to learn from them. And this conference has been designed to create collaboration opportunities for educators who wish to discover how other educators, schools, and districts integrate all components of the state's assessment system, because there's so many areas of integration there that really can make a huge impact on student outcomes. So a variety of sessions and key topics are going to be covered over the 2.5 days, allow for a customized learning experience while minimizing time away from the classroom. And participants will learn, explore, find inspiration, and return to the classroom ready to apply new skills and knowledge. So it's very exciting. And as Chair Chow mentioned, we have a dashboard app. It's also California Dashboard Week, so get into it. Hashtag get into it. Every day we have been tweeting out different components around the California dashboard. So I hope you're following our CDE Twitter account or Facebook page so you can see all of those exciting things happening and making those connections and retweet it out. Again, you can follow me on Twitter. I am retweeting as much as possible. So again, very exciting opportunities with the new administration, our new superintendent. It's very exciting times for us here at the department. And that's what I've got.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gregson. So we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda. At this time, I'd like to introduce our state board members who are here with us today. They are our State Board of Education liaisons, and they'll be giving a report on the activities of the state board. So welcome and thank you so much for joining us, State Board members Strauss and Rucker.
Well, good morning, IQC members, and thank you all for being here for this two-day meeting and for all the work you did to prepare. Welcome, Senator Allen and Assemblywoman Weber. We're really delighted to have you. Are you pointing to me, Tracy? Okay, sorry. Just checking. Just checking. So I'm joined by Member Rucker, so we'll try to share some of the update. We've been quite busy. We are certainly continuing to refine our accountability system that measures school performance on a multiple sets of measures. And one that I've been recently involved in, since you talked about assessment, is the science assessment. And we just went through a standard setting process to take a look at what the cut score should be for students who are understanding the concepts. But it really brings to point all the work you all did on the framework and the materials and how important it is to support teachers and leaders as we implement our new standards. So we'll be talking more about that at our November meeting, but I just think to reinforce how important the role of IQC is and all the work that you all do. Also, we're also working on our system of support, what we do for all schools and districts, what we do for some, and what we do for a few. So we're continuing to look at what the context is of local districts and schools that are struggling. Issues of, actually LPI just had a conference last week that talked about the outlying districts that had stronger capacity, more stability, and what kind of practices they had in investing in teachers and leaders. So all the research is helping to inform our work at the state board. We really want all schools to be serving all students as much as we can. And so that'll be an ongoing conversation as well. So I hope I left a few things for Member Rucker, since we are both liaisons here.
Well, good morning. I want to add my welcome and appreciation for our two legislators, Senator Allen and Assemblymember Weber, who are here today. There's been a lot of conversation and a lot of work that the board has been doing in the accountability area, but I also want to draw your attention in particular to the work the board is doing to approve each of the incremental pieces of the English learner proficiency indicator, progress indicator. As you know, that's one of the elements that's reported for statewide data on the dashboard. And the board adopted a 3-year plan for implementing and developing that indicator. So as part of that work, we've been looking at not only how to report status and growth using the LPAC, but what it means for the indicator to show that work. This is the second year now that we've had the LCAP in place. So when the 2019 dashboard is published in December, we will actually see that element of the indicator being shown and developed. So we're really looking forward to seeing what that work actually shows. And at this point, knowing the work of the IQC, I want to remind you, when I started as a board member, one of the first assignments I had was to serve as your liaison and supporter for the development of the math framework. And that was the first framework that the IQC did with the implementation of the Common Core and the beginning of the work we were doing to overhaul and change the direction and the scope of work that's being done for instruction and support with our students. So it's appropriate for me to use both my English teacher background and to pretend I know enough about math to be dangerous. An inflection point is something we learn about in math that's the point at which a line or a curve changes direction. Everybody just nod and pretend like you took that in high school calculus and you got an A. Well, that's a good metaphor for us to think about where we are today. There is definitely an inflection point that we are standing at with the opportunity to look at the math framework again. The math framework was the first framework we developed to implement the Common Core. And we have learned so much from that implementation, from that curriculum adoption, and from the work that was done in the field to implement math in this state. And so the opportunity now as an IQC to come full circle, to come back to the math framework, to hit that inflection point and look and see not only what we have learned about math teaching, but what we have learned about math. That's a very exciting inflection point. So I'm looking forward to taking that journey with you as well. And the board is looking forward to your sage advice about what that can mean. So thank you for your work that you're doing today and the work that you're going to continue undertaking this fall.
Thank you so much, board members. At this time, I'd also like to echo their words of welcome to Assemblymember Weber as well as Senator Allen. And I'd like to invite them to say a few words if they would like.
Exactly. You want to? Is your mic right there? There we go.
We're trying to find our way through this desk right now. But first of all, thank you. I look forward to the opportunity of serving on this. I think it is important that those of us who are elected officials do serve and are active in our service. And so I look forward to working with you. I know you have a number of issues that are coming forward that directly affect either legislation I've written or things that have happened. So hopefully I can provide some information and clarity on a number of issues and listen as well as to the public's response to it. So thank you very much for the invitation to be here.
I also thank you so much. I've never been a full-time teacher, but I've had the opportunity to teach at the elementary, high school, community college, law school, and adult school levels in various capacities. And so I also served on the school board in my hometown in Santa Monica, Malibu for 2 terms. And so it's great and I was chair of the education committee for a couple of years at the Senate as well. So I love these issues, fascinated by them, and looking forward to working with each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So at this time, we're going to look to the next item on our agenda, which deals with the revisions to the 2019 and 2020 IQC meeting dates. There are proposed revisions to both the IQC's 2019 and 2020 meeting dates. First, let's review the proposed new 2019 meeting date of October 4th. David Almquist, Seaford staff, is here to explain the purpose for this additional meeting. Welcome.
Good morning, Senator, Assembly Member, Chairwoman Chow, Commissioners, Executive Director Gregson, board members. My name is David Almquist. I'm an education programs consultant with the Curriculum Frameworks and Instructional Resources Division. And my purpose here today is to simply seek your approval for an additional meeting date of October 4th, which will be a public meeting, a public comment meeting, to hear comments on proposed revisions regarding a State Board of Education adopted history program. This is the first time this body has entertained a revisions process, so let me provide you with a little bit of background information. State law allows publishers to propose revisions to their SBE adopted programs for a fee. State regulations provide the details of this process, which include a window of submission every 2 years, a fee for every word proposed for change, the fact that there is no identified definition of revision, so a publisher can propose any revision they like to the content that they previously had approved by the board. However, proposed revisions, in order to be approved, must be consistent with the original evaluation criteria, the curriculum framework, all the relevant statutes, the social content standards, everything that was used in the original adoption process. Revisions, when submitted by the publisher, are considered proposed, and they're reviewed by the CDE or its agents, and then goes through an approval process, which includes public meetings of the IQC and the State Board of Education. And finally, except for online programs, publishers must continue to make available their originally adopted materials. Okay, and so while this revisions process has been around for about 4 years, and each year we notify the affected publishers of their window of opportunity to participate, nobody has ever participated until this year. One publisher, Studies Weekly, elected to make some changes to their K-6 adopted program. And on the CDE website, under the History, Social Sciences, Instructional Materials, you can find all of this information, and you will also find a link to the publisher's proposed revisions. And they've presented it very nicely in before and after images, so you can see exactly every word that they propose to change. My presentation today does not include a report on this review. However, early next week, we will be posting on the CDE website a preliminary advisory report along with a public notice of the October 4th meeting, should you approve it. And then at your November IQC meeting, you'll each have the opportunity to individually vote upon whether or not you approve of the proposed revisions. That vote will go into a commission advisory report, which we will then present to the State Board of Education at their January 2020 meeting. So again today, I'm simply asking for a October 4th public comment meeting. I believe it begins at 10 a.m. We'll just need a couple of you to come and hear any public comment. Do you have any questions for me on this process?
Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh, is there no question? Okay. All right. So I'd like to call for a motion to approve the October 4th, 2019 meeting date to hear public comments on the revisions to the SBE adopted History Social Science program.
I so move.
Thank you so much. Moved by Commissioner Wu.
I second.
Seconded by Commissioner Costa Hernandez. Is there any discussion on this motion? Okay. Then I would like to add, any public comment on the motion? Okay. So at this time, I'd like to call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Then the motion carries. Okay, next let's review the proposed revised April 2020 meeting date. It's come to our attention that the April 6, 2020 IQC meeting needs to be rescheduled by 1 week. The purpose of the April meeting is the IQC will review the draft Arts and World Languages frameworks, second 60-day field review results, and recommend to the State Board of Education final edits to both frameworks. The State Board of Education will then take action to adopt both frameworks at its May 6th, 7th, 2020 meeting. The second 60-day review for both frameworks will close on March 31st, 2020. After the public review closes, Seaford staff needs time to process and organize the comments. Therefore, it's recommended to move the April 6th meeting to either April 13th, 17th, or 20th. These are the only days the meeting room is available. So these are the days that we're looking at. In your red folder on yellow paper is a revised version. So if you could take that out for a moment and review.
So some things to note about the dates that you'll want to consider as you're making a decision is April 13th is the Monday after Easter. Okay? And April 17th is the Friday before the Health Instructional Materials Adoption Training. So you've got, some of you will be here on that Monday for the training. So you'll need to consider all of those things. The 13th is the Monday after Easter. You'll want to consider that with your schedules. And then the 20th would be the morning of the training, and so may allow for the commissioners 1 day of travel. However, though, April 20th is late to get the framework ready for posting for the May board meeting. So that's not a very good date either. So all three of them have their issues. So I leave it up to you to decide which issue you want to deal with.
I have a question. Do we have to pick the date, or is it just as
You have to pick
we
the
have
date.
to pick the date? Okay.
I have for me personally, the 13th works the best because it's a student-free day in my district, and also I think would give CDE more time to get our feedback. So I'm advocating for the 13th.
Thank you so much for that. Yes.
I'm voting for the 17th. but I think we'll both work to whatever decision folks make.
Thank you so much. How do we want to do this? Do we want to do like a vote or
All right, so you've got 13th and the 17th right now that you've got votes for. So those are your two options, it looks like. So you may want to do a vote for the 13th or the 17th.
Okay. Who feels that the 13th is the best date for them? 1, 2. 13th, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Okay. And then who would prefer the 17th? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9. Okay.
I'm looking at my staff. 17th, we're going to be all right? We're going to be okay? Will we survive? They'll survive. They're awesome.
Thank you so much. And at this time, are there any other comments? Because hearing none, I'm going to. Oh, yes. So I'm going to at this time call for a motion to approve April 17th, 2020 as a meeting date.
I move that April 17th be the meeting date.
Thank you. Moved by Commissioner Murphy-Corwin. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Needitz. And is there any discussion or public comment? Then at this time, I'd like to take a vote for the meeting date of April 17th, 2020. Sorry. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Then the motion passes. Okay. All right. Are there any other matters or public comment on non-agenda items? Okay. Then at this time, we're going to have the Art Subject Matter Committee. And I'd like to ask Chair Tonkovich.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Arts SMC to order. If you're a member, please put your nameplate face up. If you're not on this committee, please place your nameplate face down. The members are myself, Vice Chair Commissioner Murphy-Corwin, Commissioners Chapman, Costa Hernandez Fairchild, Rustin Wu, and IQC Chair Chow. I would like to recognize our staff, Letty Krause, consultant, and Constantino Silva, our administrator. I would like to recommend, our goal today is to recommend to the full commission approval of the draft for the arts framework for the first 60-day public review and comment. Okay, I would like to, I lost my page right. All right, and the framework committee and the CFCC at their last meeting. Okay, I lost my place, sorry. Today we're taking action on the draft arts framework recommended by the Visual and Performing Arts Curriculum Framework and Evaluation Criteria Committee, known as the VAPA-CFCC, at their last meeting in August. I would like to pause and thank the team of writers who drafted chapters to meet the State Board approved guidelines and made revisions based on the consensus decisions of the VAPA-CFCC. So thank you. I'm hoping they're here. Chris Alexander, Armand De La O, and Courtney Sawada. The writers were thorough and responsive, and the chapters followed State Board guidance and reflect CFCC consensus. I look forward to a discussion of the draft framework this morning, but first I'm going to ask Dr. Gregson to provide some context for today's discussion and action.
All right, so I'll make this brief because this is something that we agreed to do whenever we're looking at framework action and to know where we're at in the entire process. So in August, we completed the major milestone of the arts framework where the CFCC came together and met over six times, 2 days each, so a total of 12 days. There were 20 people that were a part of the VAPA-CFCC appointed by the State Board. And so now they've done all their work. They're done. They've completed their job, and they're handing it over to you. And your role today is to determine how many edits or revisions do you want to make prior to going to its first, because remember there's two, its first 60-day public comment review period. Okay, so once you've made your decision around what type of edits and revisions you make, we do that here at CDE, and then we post it out for public comment for 60 days. And all of those public comments will be coming back to you in January. Okay, so that's where we're at in the puzzle of the framework development process. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Gregson. Now we will review the guidelines and highlight some of the ways that the draft framework meets them. Letty Krause and Chris Alexander are going to share with us some highlights from the draft framework.
Thank you. So before you begin your discussion, and mostly I'll be speaking, and Chris may jump in here and there if we need some help. But I just wanted to call your attention to a few details that might inform your discussion. First of all, keep in mind that the CFCC reviewed each chapter at least 3 times, but it's important to note that the CFCC had to deal with 5 different arts disciplines, and they were all experts in mostly one of those disciplines. So how we dealt with that was we asked people to review chapters outside of their discipline on a different level of review, looking at it from the point of view of someone perhaps coming to the chapter as an administrator or someone without the content knowledge. So we did cross-review that way to help ensure accessibility to general audiences with each chapter. It's also important to note that Chapter 4 took a slightly different route. They, rather late in the process, decided to rewrite the chapter. And so I'm sure if you read Chapter 4, when you read Chapter 4, you may have noticed the difference. And so I'll say a little more about that later. Rather than march through the guidelines with you, I just wanted to kind of highlight a few things because the framework, we can look at it as chapters as we plod through and read, but I want to look at it in terms of a whole document perspective. So first of all, Chapter 0, the Guide to Reading and Using the Framework, was added. The committee thought it would be useful and helpful to help different users get in. We consulted with them on how long it should be, how short it should be, etc., and its purpose. So I want to highlight that that piece was added by then to help with usability. I want to also highlight that throughout the framework, there's a strong emphasis on inclusion and equitable access to high-quality, sequential, standards-based arts education. And some aspects of that you'll find in Chapter 1, where there's a discussion about learning in the arts as part of a well-rounded education, and also the Every Student Succeeds Act, also California Education Code, local control funding formula, and local control accountability plans. Also in Chapter 1, the discussion of the opportunity to learn standards, which are a set of criteria developed by the Consortium of National Arts Education Associations, and they identify the conditions and resources necessary to provide each and every California student with a quality arts education. Also, a discussion of inclusive arts education in Chapter 1, which talks about support being embedded within each chapter of the discipline. And finally, for this point, Chapter 9, which is aimed at administrators, which discusses effective and equitable arts education, and again emphasizes sequential standards-based comprehensive and prioritized arts education. The next thing that is embedded throughout that I want to call your attention to is universal design for learning and embedded support for English learners, students with disabilities, and students who are gifted and talented. Because we know that teachers of the arts usually have very mixed classes and they're serving a wide variety of learners within one class, and also because we know this framework will have 5 semi-independent chapters because of 5 independent disciplines, this framework was breaking the ground in trying to embed support throughout rather than have a separate chapter to address different needs of different students. We know this is a challenge, and we know this is a journey, and we feel like we're on the right path, but we're looking forward to public comment on that. Also, I want to call attention to this idea of the copyright, intellectual property, and digital citizenship, again, embedded throughout because of the 5 semi-independent chapters. Also, with Chapter 2, when we address the instructional cycle, again, this framework is different in that assessment is embedded within that chapter because of the idea that the assessment is not separate from instruction. It is part of the cycle. And so you'll see that that is another difference with this framework, different than the other frameworks. Finally, well, almost finally, sorry, media arts. So again, the challenge with media arts is it's not a new discipline in terms of the arts. It's not new, as they continuously asserted in our discussions. However, it is newly articulated through the lens of PK-12 standards. And so that is the challenge for this chapter. So the media arts group tried to go a very independent route with this work. And so we are looking forward to hearing from the public, especially about this chapter. It's a new thing we're doing here, and we will need lots of perspectives and input, and we look forward to that. Finally, I believe this is finally, the arts integration chapter. I want to make a couple of comments on that as well. The chapter recognizes that there are multiple models of integration for arts integration out there in the field. As such, the chapter is general. It does not promote any one way for arts integration. What it does is it provides a general definition of integrated instruction, and it also names and describes styles, approaches, and models for integration, and this is meant to function as reference points for educators as they develop their instruction or even analyze, and what am I doing with arts integration? Now I can name it. I can categorize it. I could say a lot more about that, but I'm not going to. I just wanted to note that that's the approach of Chapter 8. And again, we know we're going to hear from the field, and we're looking forward to it. So that concludes my comments. So back to you, Commissioner Tonkovich.
Did our writers want to make any comments? No? Okay. I was able to attend several days of the VAPA CFCC meetings and observe the discussions how to make this framework a useful tool for educators. And while I was sitting one day, I wrote down some adjectives as I observed the group, and I wrote thoughtful, reflective, articulate, respectful of others' opinions to reach consensus. I think it's a fantastic document, and I'd like to applaud the VAPA CFCC, the writers, and the CDE staff. We're fortunate that all members of the Arts CMC attended at least one meeting. Would anyone else like to report on their observations?
As co-chair, I was very fortunate to be able to attend also several of the meetings, and I do want to echo my chair's comments. I found the group to, even though they are very distinct in their disciplines, they were able to work together. They respected each other at all times, And I was also very taken with the enthusiasm, which was very evident. I do want to thank the leadership that was shown by the CDE and also the writers, especially in a couple of instances where they did have to display some patience. But I was there on the very last day, and it was exciting to see the group come together and to have this finished product. I'm very anxious to have the public have input, and I'll be looking forward to the January meeting.
Any other commissioners? Thank you, Commissioner Murphy-Cohen. Yes, Commissioner Wu.
I attended the next to last meeting, which was kind of when they threw media arts up and went real deep into starting over on that. And it was really interesting to see a lot of the work they put into that. They actually had one of the CFCC members was unable to attend in person, and so she was on conference call for pretty much the entire day in order to get that media arts chapter redone. And they brought in people from all of the other groups and to get that rewritten. And it was very interesting to watch the thought they put into that. Having attended other CFCC meetings for other frameworks that were not as congenial, it was very nice to see how well they all worked together.
Thank you, Commissioner Wu. Any other commissioners on the Arts CMC? Nope. Well, thank you. I appreciate your insight on what you observed. It's now time to hear from the members of the Arts CMC about any issues or concerns you would like to discuss as we prepare the draft framework for public review. We're going to go in order by chapter number, starting with the Guide to Reading and Using framework, which has been referred to as Chapter 0. Would anyone like to begin the comments, beginning with the Guide to Reading and Using the framework? Any IQC members who are not on the Arts CMC? Any State Board of Education members like to make a comment on the framework? I do have one comment that is appreciation, and that is that when they talked about the parallel structure in here, I went through, it says it has a common organizational structure. So I went through each chapter and saw, I really appreciate that consistency. So thank you. Are there any other comments, questions, suggestions about this chapter? Then I would suggest that we move on to Chapter 1. The vision and goals for standards-based art education. So in order, any arts SMC commissioners like to make a comment on Chapter 1? Any other commissioners like to make a comment? Or anyone on the IQC like to make a comment? State Board of Education members, would like to make a comment on Chapter 1? All righty. I have one, and I am showing a restraint because I'm also eager to see the public review after 60 days, but I do have one tiny, on page 9, line 247, if you could please delete that first as, in the first bullet, the as. Okay, thank you. And let me go through quickly. I'm afraid I'm old school with hard copy and Post-it notes. All right, I think I'm good. Any other comments or suggestions for Chapter 1? Then let's begin Chapter 2. The instructional cycle. Any arts? SMC commissioners?
I do have some general comments. I think that, Letty, you may have addressed some of these issues, but as I reviewed Chapter 2, it is very, very heady in research, and while I appreciate that we're providing some really strong background why this content is so important, as I read through the other instructional chapters in the different areas, I just kept seeing repeats and repeats, and also redefining terms just as they had in Chapter 2. And so I put my elementary educator hat on, and I wonder if it's just overwhelming in the research background, but also the repetition within each of those different disciplines. And it became a little much. I don't know about the rest of my SMC members, but it just was a little bit overwhelming. And then to see it repetitive and repetitive again on certain terms about the essential understandings and the assessment guidelines, which I think are important as we looked at each discipline chapter, that it belonged there, it lived there, but that chapter 2 just seemed a bit overwhelming to me.
So Commissioner Chapman, are you then asking us to look, as we move forward, looking at the public comments to see if they're addressing the same issue, and then at the same time, with any revisions, looking at how we can revise to make it less heavy on research pieces and make it clarifying a little bit more for elementary teachers?
I think that if it lives in the discipline chapters, so, you know, it belongs in the media arts, then maybe we should keep it in there, because I know that's important as a secondary teacher, that you're maybe only going to go to that media arts section or that visual arts because that's your focus area. And so if we're going to have definitions and defining everything, maybe make it a little bit more refined in Chapter 2. So, or in that, like, pick one or the other, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and so that it's not so repetitive.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Are you referring to the parts where we're describing the elements of the standards? Or, so Chapter 2 has two parts, sort of. One, the first part describes the different elements of the standards, and then the second part talks more about the instructional cycle. Are you talking more about where we're talking about the different parts of the standards? So what is an essential question? What is an enduring understanding?
Exactly.
Is that what you're talking?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
And I just felt like even in Chapter 2 that some of the information was repetitive.
Thank you, Commissioner Chapman. I think that we are thinking that the public review will address some of that repetition, and then we'll look to see that. But I do, at this point, have a question for Letty Krause, and I think Chapter 2 addresses it, and that is to remind us, because I had asked earlier, what is the difference between a vignette and a snapshot, which is beginning in Chapter 2?
I'm going to turn this one over to Chris.
Hi. So a snapshot is a small...
Here.
Oh. Here, let's get...
We'll find the switch.
Obviously not in permanent.
Okay.
Still not? All right. Okay, you can. So a snapshot is shorter in length and focuses on one concept or idea to help clarify or provide a short example. A vignette is longer, and it provides more information. It dives into either the classroom, or if it's talking about professional learning, it explains more in depth. So I think of it as snapshot, a little glimpse, help articulate something or illustrate it. The vignette, a longer.
Right.
Also,
And-
generally vignettes are tied to standards in some way. And then also we know that once we hear from the public and our vignettes and snapshots change, we're going to have to go through some formatting that will help them all look more like one another.
Right. And vignettes are also used in professional learning sessions. We use them constantly with our other frameworks when we're out presenting at conferences. And I know as a principal, I used it with my staff because that is the purpose of a framework. Is it's a guidance document that is for a professional learning tool, and that's a core of a piece of that is the vignettes.
Thank you.
Can I ask or about the vignettes and the snapshots? And this is maybe for just to keep an eye, because I had the same question. What is the difference in purpose? And I was wondering, after reading several chapters, if there is an opportunity there to make it more explicit how the students, all kinds of students, are supported, like really unpacking, for example, universal design for learning in those lessons, because if you have those lenses already, you'll see it. But I'm thinking in terms of people who don't have those lenses, you say in the chapters that it's embedded. Let's see it in the classroom example as well.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on Chapter 2? All right, let's proceed to Chapter 3, Dance. Any question, comments, or suggestions from the Arts SMC about this chapter? Yes. Commissioner Melanie Corwin.
I am just a couple of comments. Number one, I'm going to be extremely anxious. I'm really, really, really hoping that elementary teachers do look especially at this chapter. As someone with a few years under my belt of elementary teaching, I observed a difference in the examples, in the vignettes and the snapshots between the secondary lessons and elementary, insofar as I felt that the secondary lessons, one in particular about the history, in a way, the history of dance, looking at marathon dancing and looking at the Charleston and combining that with historical research, excellent. It was an outstanding, coordinated, tight history lesson and dance lesson as well. When I looked at the elementary examples, I would really have some questions in the sphere of reality as to what elementary teacher in a self-contained classroom is going to do all that for dance. I really had this question. So I'm going to be anxious to hear from, hopefully, elementary teachers out there in the state of California, what they think of the dance component. I do have one other very specific, and I may have missed it. But I noticed on page 66, and it is repeated, there is reference to students finding a Laban movement, capital Laban. I scoured the glossary at the back. I looked through other pages. I couldn't find a definition. I have no idea what that is. And I couldn't find a definition. So if it's line 1516 on page 66. So if that could be defined, that would be helpful, because I didn't know what they were supposed to be doing, what kind of movement. But otherwise, very comprehensive, and it's exciting.
Thank you, Commissioner Murphy-Corwin. I'm also inclined to agree when I read it, and I'm looking at B in our guidelines, that the framework is accessible to all our stakeholders. not the generalists, the specialists, the support staff, the administration, community members, and so forth. So I'm looking forward to that feedback too. Thank you. Any other arts SMC commissioners wish to comment or make a question or suggestion? Any other commissioners? State Board of Education members?
Well, I would like to thank Commissioner Murphy-Corin for bringing up the idea about how this framework is going to be received and consumed by different populations of the education workforce. It is different to be a single subject art teacher, as Commissioner Tonkovich is, because she understands each of the elements and the criteria and the components for a successful, integrated, and broad art curriculum. But when you start talking about implementing this framework in a multiple subject setting among people who do not have the same depth of understanding about not only the content of teaching art, but the context for art itself, it requires a different type of support and even a different type of advice in the language of the framework. So I appreciate the candor and the bravery that it took to say, we need to make sure we're looking at how to advise those who were not trained as an art teacher and who are more generalist in education than the kinds of specialists that high schools and middle schools sometimes have the privilege of having. So I think that that's an appropriate way to think about this. And maybe as we are going out in the field and we're recruiting folks to take a look at this and to take an understanding of that, we try to find a lot of folks who we want to be consumers of this framework and figure out ways to get them to offer that same kind of candor and perspective in their responses.
Thank you, Ms. Board Education Member Rucker. I'm in agreement with the multiple users, and I am going to look forward to that feedback from our public. Now, does anyone else have a question or comment? I have two minor ones. On page 4, line 112, I'll wait for our writers to get there. One bullet, I know I'm detail-oriented at times, that it should include a works cited bullet. Do you see? Thank you. And then on page 65, there's a table, universal design for learning, that is in all 5 disciplines. I'll wait till you get there, page 65. It's around line 1489. So in the spirit of parallel structure, I noticed that this is very small, but 2 of the exact same chart, 2 are in this light grayscale and 2 are in black, 3 are in black, so that's not the same. And then I'm going to suggest that they're in the lighter value because as someone like myself who likes to print out hard copies, then, the classroom teacher might use less ink when they're printing out that chart. And that is the end of my comments for Chapter 3. Anyone else before we move to Chapter 4? All righty, let's go. Yes, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, someone was asking about late
Yes, Commissioner Murphy-Corwin.
Yeah, I thought, I looked it up because I thought I knew what it was, and I did. It basically is a movement that talks about dances for everybody. And so it doesn't limit itself to just the specialists or the ones who are trained dancers. They're people who believe that everybody can dance. Oh. So as a result, you sometimes have these organizations, all children, everybody's encouraged to participate, the older, the young. You may be able to dance when you come something that everyone can do, not just something for the artist. Yeah.
Thank you for your comment. If there are no more comments for Chapter 3. Let's move to Chapter 4. Now, as I read Chapter 4, it was evident to me that it was written in a different voice. And I'm going to say that I'm looking forward to the feedback for Chapter 4 on hearing what the public has to say. And I am assuming there will be some revision that we address those multiple users, someone who is not a media arts specialist. So any arts SMC members, would you like to make a comment? Yes, Commissioner Rustin.
Sure. So I too had the pleasure of being at a CFCC meeting in June when they were working on the media arts chapter. And I do want to applaud the group that worked on the media arts chapter because, as has already been discussed, it was on a sort of different timeline. It was a little bit rushed towards the summertime, but they did put a lot of work in, obviously. But I am interested in looking at the public comment because not only is the voice different, but there are a few parts of it that I think are a little underdeveloped. So page 54, specifically, where it talks about culturally relevant and linguistic teaching, the emphasis quote there, I'm interested to see if we have any public comment on that because that particular quote, I don't think it best suits the message that they're trying to send there. So this portion of culturally relevant teaching, there isn't a lot in there specific that I as a teacher would be able to use, but that particular emphasis quote frames it as a matter of disadvantaged students and disadvantaged youth. So when it comes to culturally responsive or culturally relevant teaching, it's very important that we not think about these groups with a deficit-oriented mindset and think of them as poor, disadvantaged kids that, arts could be something. And then the quote also talks about developing articulated positions on issues of relevance to themselves. I could see teachers looking at that and really thinking about the disadvantaged part and the articulated part and thinking of the arts as a way to shape these kids up and get them to speak proper English and do this and do that. So I'm interested in seeing that part get more developed and in line with more, recent scholarship on culturally relevant teaching. And also the snapshot a few pages later on page 66 where students are editing. That's a perfect place for them to show a little bit of how you could keep that culturally relevant. So it talks about students doing an editing project using sample footage and I know at our school, our film teacher, the sample footage comes from our own campus, so students see themselves and their teachers in that footage, and that's just a quick way to keep it relevant to the students and keep it familiar versus stock footage, which is available online, but a lot of the stock footage doesn't reflect the diversity of California schools, for instance. So I'm definitely looking forward to the public comment on how to make this chapter reflect a little bit more of the importance of cultural relevance in digital arts specifically, but I also agree that the tone of it is a little bit different. So we'll see. I guess hopefully we'll have some revisions that'll help get it more consistent with the rest of the framework.
Thank you, Commissioner Rustin. I was going to bring that up later. Some of the emphasis quotes I did not always feel reflected the section succeeding it, and I was hoping that the public might have alternative emphasis quotes to submit. Any other SMC, Arts SMC commissioners? Yes.
Yes. So I agree with the comments made by Commissioner Rustin, and I want to echo that for English learners, there is a sentence on line 1447 on page 56. Since media arts is multimodal, there are fewer linguistic barriers to participation. It's not that I disagree, but that sometimes I think it needs to be elaborated on that. This is not a hands-off. Sometimes that can be interpreted, okay, we're good to go, because it's the media arts. And then the other comment I have, and again, my comments may be more applicable after the review, but just something to keep in mind, this chapter needs more connections or more references to chapter 8, I think more than the others, because the way I read it as a person who is completely new to this, so I'm reading it freely from an outsider's perspective. The media arts are inherently more geared towards that interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary integration, just by the nature, right? But this is chapter 4, and if we read it in order, happens before chapter 8. And that explanation of those types of integration that are very important to understand what the position of this framework on media arts are happening later. So stronger connections and references to that chapter will be helpful, so that it's coherent, internally coherent with the information we're providing in chapter 8.
Thank you, Commissioner Costa Hernandez. Any other comments or suggestions from the IQC? Any from our State Board of Education members? All right, well, I do have a few on page 7, line 171.
Before you start.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I just want to, so in general, what I think I'm hearing are things we want to look for. But so it would be very important going forward as we keep going to understand that we have to also post on October 1st. So if there are things like changing the value of the gray in the tables, that I took just as, oh, I will do that before October 1st. But if we could just be clear on what is to happen before October 1st versus what we're looking for in public comment, that would be very helpful to us. Please.
Thank you, Letty. Page 7 on line 171. This is the only time I've noticed it, but it has STEM instead of STEAM, and every other reference has been to STEAM. But it includes
Explicitly STEM reference in there.
Oh, all right.
One is STEM and the others are STEAM.
All right, never mind. Thank you. Then on page, let me find it. It was the Maya Deren quote, if I could find it. Do you see which page in Media Arts, the Maya Deren quote? There's Viola. I'm sorry? 73, thank you. Thank you. One of the things I look for that all the quotes had a title behind them, and Maya Deren should have experimental filmmaker or avant-garde filmmaker. Thank you. She's Maya Deren is well, okay, let me ask the other commissioners. I've heard her addressed, I use it both ways, experimental filmmaker, avant-garde filmmaker. I personally like avant-garde myself.
So adding the title avant-garde filmmaker after her name for the October 1st posting.
Yes. Thank you. All right, if there are no more suggestions for Chapter 4, then let's address Chapter 5. Are there any Arts SMC commissioners who would like to make a comment, suggestion, question? Chapter 5 is our music. Any other commissioners?
I did have a quick question, and it's not a suggestion for a change, but it was just a question I had as I was reading this particular chapter. I noticed that when it came to the section on the coding of the standards, there was the one that was consistent. So I'm looking at page 15. So it's like grade level and discipline, artistic process, the anchor, and so on and so forth. And then there was like a second standards coding example that had like novice in front of it. And so just the question that I'd like to pose and perhaps get feedback from the public is if the rationale for that difference was clear, because it wasn't completely clear to me why this discipline had the two ways of coding and then perhaps the other disciplines didn't.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Chow. Perhaps the music chapter is completely has its own way of the grade bands and proficiency. Would our writers like to address that? No? Yes?
I think perhaps what's maybe confusing here is that the explanation starting at line 311, unlike the other arts disciplines, there are 5 sets of performance standards, et cetera, and it talks about the additional levels. So the other standards don't have those additional levels. So it may be a simple fix, perhaps, to move figure 5.4 after that explanation.
Or if it's clear, if it's clear to the field practitioners, then maybe no change is needed. But I know that, like, reading it as kind of a layperson who hasn't taught music.
Well, just looking at it right now, I think that regardless of who, putting that figure later, just doing that would help. Whether that's enough, I don't know.
So why don't we suggest we go ahead and move that for the October 1st then?
And Letty, if I may add another small observation, those 2 coding charts that Commissioner Chow referenced, do you notice one is black and one is grayscale? If they could all be consistent as well, thank you.
Although I also want to add that maybe some of the finer details we will definitely be able to clean up later, is my thought. But the meat of it, like the ideas and the content, is definitely something that we would want to look at in our evaluation. Yeah.
I know. I was waiting for there's some things I am waiting for the review. These I know there are technical things. Any other question or comment?
Commissioner Tonkovich, if you have a list of those very minor edits, then just hand us those lists, because those are typographical, grammatical, those type of things, and not necessarily aligned with content issues. So you can just make those lists and hand them off to Letty, and we'll make them before the October 1st.
All righty. Thank you. Anyone else like to make a question, comment, suggestion on Chapter 5? No, then let's move on to Chapter 6. Any Arts SMC commissioners like to make question, comment, or suggestion? Any other IQC commissioners? Any State Board of Education members? Well then, I think that at Chapter 6 will be the same as we've talked about, waiting for the 60-day public review to address in January. Let's go to Chapter 7. Any Arts SMC commissioners like to address Chapter 7? Any IQC commissioners like to address Chapter 7? Any State Board of Education members like to address Chapter 7? Then, in the spirit of the other disciplines, we'll wait for our further evaluation after our 60-day review. Let's continue to Chapter 8. Any Arts SMC commissioners like to comment? Any IQC commissioners like to comment? Any State Board of Education members like to comment on Chapter 8?
Good morning again. I think as I read this chapter and I listened this morning to what Commissioner Murphy-Corin said, her advice concerning understanding who will be the consumers of the information, particularly in the integration chapter, applies here as well. And in particular, I do want to suggest that there are some mega terms which don't seem to be a big issue for arts teachers that might be a concern for other people who read it. I'll give you a particular example. When you go to page 4 and you're looking at Bresler's 4 styles of art integration. Now, I was an elementary school arts teacher. I could not get a mental model that helped me understand anything about the subservient style for integrating art. So I understood what the intent was and what the distinct explanation of the difference of that style is, but I could not imagine what that would actually look like in the 3rd grade or 5th grade or even 1st grade class that I taught. And so I think that this is an example of a chapter where there would be a great benefit to having some vignettes to show or to create imagery about the application of each of these styles, and maybe even considering some explicit examples of a lesson plan or connecting some of these examples to Common Core standards, either in the English language arts or mathematics or from history, social science, as a way of showing the distinctive ways of doing the integration. I hope that my suggestions make sense. And for the staff who are staring at me right now, I'm happy to put that in writing if you think that I need to do that, because I'm trying not to go into a lot of detail, but I'm hoping that that helps to make sense.
And that's something, Board Member Rucker, that we can do throughout the process. I don't think that's something we can do to get ready for October 1st, but definitely as we're moving forward, keeping our eye on to make these revisions and adding those elements in. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gregson. That's what I was going to add as well. Yes, I think we're not looking at you as, oh my God, we have all this work to do. I think we're trying to make it work, and I appreciate your comments. And I think going forward, that's something we definitely want to address. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other question or comments? I have one that I'm wondering. On page 1, line 8, the awe and wonder of learning reflects the first sentence of the last page on page 31. The first sentence of the last paragraph on page 31, which is a quote, allows students to experience awe and wonder. And I'm wondering if that quote could be at the beginning. It explains why you said awe and wonder. I mean, I'm open for discussion. I just saw the mirrored sentence, and it's explained on the last quote. Does anyone have any conversation about that? We could wait for the 60-day public review to make that decision. All right. If there is one other comment I'm going to make, is that when I attended the CFCC meetings, I found it so enriching outside of my my arts discipline, and that I learned so many new terms. One was learning silos. That was a brand new term to me, and of course it's in the interdisciplinary connecting the dots. Silos of learning means it's fragmented and isolated, and I really loved that metaphor and learning something new. All right, thank you. If there's no more questions, comments, suggestions, let's jump to Chapter 9. Any arts SMC commissioners? Question, comments? Yes, Commissioner Chapman.
Just positive comments. I like how, that there are many options for schools to implement this, and also that we're talking about the K-12, the pre-K-12 process, and how different options on how this can be implemented. So I was grateful for that chapter.
You? Any other arts SMC commissioners? Any IQ? Yes.
Good morning. Just a general comment and then one particular suggestion. First of all, I want to say thank you. When I read this framework in terms of a conceptual framework, it really helped me to understand, not having this particular background, why was this not in existence when I was a high school principal? It would have helped so much. And I can tell you, for administrators that are out there in the field right now, this is going to help so much, particularly at the high school level. I know this is not written for high school level, but it really does. And I think it's going to help everyone based on the comments that were made. But anyway, the only thing I wanted to say here is, speaking of high school, Chapter 9, lines 50 and 51 and 52 and 53, I simply wanted to point out, if this chapter is intended for all stakeholders to read, one of the things that I noticed in a lot of the high schools that I visit and work with is a lot of times there's confusion as to whether or not the courses, if one were to take a course in each semester, whether or not those courses have to be in the same discipline to meet the CSU UCs. And I know also a lot of times as a result of master scheduling issues and or resources, a lot of high schools aren't able to offer that in the same discipline. And I was just wondering, and I don't know how the other commissioners feel, since we mentioned that right here in lines 52 and 53, and since this is intended for, generally speaking anyway, stakeholders, I'm wondering if it would be a good idea to just really point that out, that if possible, the courses taken, if it's one semester and one semester, that it's in the same discipline.
Dr. Gregson, did you have a comment about that? Sorry. My understanding is that for the A through G, it must be.
Right, that I'm saying.
Define it here.
Right.
Right.
Sorry, I forgot about the microphone. Given that the chapter itself is addressed to various stakeholders, and by the way, I'm just wondering about that as well. On the same chapter, lines 26 and 27, we mention other types of titles here, and I guess one could argue that counselors are included in school leaders, but I'm wondering, why not just make it explicit? I don't know that we have anything to lose for the public review if we just include their title as part of the stakeholder audience. But
what line are you looking at? I mean, where are you?
Chapter 9, 26, and 27. I mean, that's not a biggie. I know it's going to go out
see.
for public review, but I just think we can't lose anything with that.
All right.
Can we go? So for the public review, we'll add counselors, school counselors to line 26. And then for lines 52 and 3, a clarifying note about the discipline.
About the UC A to G requirement for arts to be explicit.
Yeah, that's it. I'm
What
not
it is.
dictating how it should be written, but simply to make it clear to whoever's reading that it should be in the same discipline, because actually, I think most kids take a semester-based course as opposed to an entire year.
And that's also before October 1st.
Yes.
We
Well-
can do that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Could I ask a clarifying? I never thought about the high school graduation requirement. Can that be one semester of two different disciplines, or no? Does that have to be the same? No, I don't know.
So yeah, that's what we need specified. So it does, the A through G requirement.
Well, I'm not
what
talking
is
about
the
A through G. I'm talking about the state.
Or the high school grad requirement?
Yes.
Yeah, that's another, that also might need some clarification then.
I'm sorry, I would concur. I think that could only help, even if it's just in parentheses. If I'm reading that and I'm a counselor or someone who's not a specialist in that area, I think that would certainly help.
So that's a new request to include the state.
Yes.
The state requirement, not
Yes, please.
not the UC entrance requirement.
Correct.
Then we'll just need to verify the ed code language for the high school graduation for the state requirement to ensure that we're utilizing the same language. And I believe we are, but we'll make sure we are.
Thank you. Commissioner Costa Hernandez?
I'm going to offer this humbly, and I will not be offended if it doesn't make it into to the public comment. But on Chapter 9, I love the quote on page 51 that access is the lowest threshold measure for arts education. So with that in mind, on page 1, line 19, on that sentence that says authentic and meaningful arts learning takes place when students participate in education programs as opposed to have access to arts. And later, maybe we can look for all those places where we use access and change it into a more active word. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a compliment is how comprehensive again, I learned something new I'd never heard of, and now opportunities to learn standards. I really enjoy learning new things. So if anyone have other question, comments, suggestions before we move on? Other IQC commissioners, State Board of Education members? You do? No? Okay. Thank you. Let's move to Chapter 10, Instructional Materials. Arts SMC commissioners, any question, comments, suggestions? Other IQC commissioners? State Board of Education members? I do have one question. When I attended the meeting, AB 413 had not yet passed, changing at risk to at promise, which was a very lovely term. Is that now? Has that passed now, the at promise instead of at risk?
Yes. Yes, but
been signed by the governor yet?
No, it hasn't been signed. It's right sitting there. However, at risk occurs one time in the entire framework. The word.
Oh, I'm just saying how much I enjoyed learning new things. I wasn't asking to change anything. I just like the term. It's a tangent. I just like that promise. I'm sorry. State Board of Education members, any question, comments, suggestions on Chapter 10? All right, then let's move to the appendices. Arts SMC commissioners, any questions, comments, suggestions to the appendices? Other IQC commissioners? State Board of Education members? Well then, I believe we have finished. Thank you, commissioners, state board members, for your comments and suggestions. We've come to agreement on some changes to the draft framework. Before we take formal action on these changes, we will hear public comments. Are there any members of the public who would like to provide comment on the draft framework or any of the issues we have discussed? And you will have 1 minute for your comments.
Morning all, Jerry Lieberman, Director of the State Education and Environment Roundtable. Yes, I am here again. Yes, this is the fourth framework I'm trying to contribute to, and maybe I can just leave it at that. I really like Chapter 8 and the interdisciplinary and integration ideas, and that's specifically a place that I think that I can offer some comment and public contribution to in terms of potentially the vignettes or snapshots that the board member Rucker spoke about, having been involved in the science framework and the history framework and the health framework and now all those rollouts. It's something that I think about constantly, and so I've offered Chris to help her work on and contribute to some of those. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who would like to provide public comment? Well, then I would like to end.
One more. Hi, my name is Mary Beth Barber, and I actually served on the CFCC, and I wasn't going to make a public comment except that I wanted to come up and say thank you for the opportunity for the 20 of us to be able to contribute to arts education so meaningfully in the state, as well as a big shout out to all of the staff, because we were definitely a highly demanding group, and the staff were champions, and I can't speak highly enough about them. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? So we're now ready to take action on the draft framework. There will be two motions. The first will be to recommend the draft framework to the full IQC. The second will be to ask the full IQC to delegate the chair and vice chair of this Arts SMC to work with the staff and writers as they make changes that are approved by the commission. Staff, would you like to summarize any changes that were agreed on before we accept a motion and vote?
I think we've got a couple of very minor changes. I think the most significant change that we'll make, besides titling the media arts quote, is in Chapter 9, adding the language about the requirements. But otherwise, I feel like it's a pretty light ask for changes before October 1st. And also, I think we will look at instead of access, we will take that suggestion that you made, at least the initial one, and then we'll wait for public comment, but we'll keep looking at where else that can occur. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I need a motion from an Arts Subject Matter Committee member to recommend to the Instructional Quality Commission that the draft framework be sent out for the first 60-day public review and comment period with the changes that we have agreed to today.
I would like to move that this draft be sent out to the public for a 60-day review.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. The motion's been made by Commissioner Murphy-Corwin and seconded by Commissioner Wu. Is there any discussion on the motion? Are there any commissioners not on the Arts SMC who would like to comment on the motion? Any comments from our state board members? Any public comments on the motion? It is time to vote. Remember, only members of the Arts SMC members can vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Sorry, I would like a motion to ask the full Instructional Quality Commission to delegate to the chair and vice chair of the Arts Subject Matter Committee the review and approval of the agreed upon changes to the draft framework as well as any minor edits identified by the staff and writers, such as grammar, punctuation, and so forth, and before the draft framework is sent out for its first 60-day public review and comment period. May I have a motion?
I so move.
The motion has been made by Commissioner Murphy-Corwin. Is there a second?
I second.
Oh, thank you. The motion is seconded by Commissioner Chapman. Is there any discussion of the motion? Are there any commissioners not on the Arts SMC committee who would like to comment on the motion? Any comments from our State Board of Education members on the motion? Is there any public comment on the motion? We are now ready to vote. Remember, only members of the Arts SMC committee can vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Anyone wish to abstain? The motion passes. So thank you, commissioners. Thank you, writing team, for your efforts. I appreciate your diligence and thoughtful effort and attention to the feedback and requests of the VAPA CFCC and the vision for inclusive and equitable arts education for each and every one of California students that is articulated in the draft framework. Thank you, Seaford staff, who have been leading, supporting the development of this framework, and thank you, Dr. Gregson, for your valuable leadership. I know you and the team will continue to provide this support as the work continues. And as for myself, I'm very excited about the document, and I'm looking forward to reading the public comments from the first 60-day review. Anyone else wish to make any comments? Our next point is approval of the draft survey. It's to take action on the survey that will be posted on the CDE webpage along with the draft framework. The online survey will allow survey users to provide written feedback on the draft chapters of the arts framework during our first 60-day public review period. Survey users can respond to as many or as few questions as they choose. Excuse me. The comments received will be compiled by Seaford staff and presented to the Arts Subject Matter Committee and the IQC for consideration at our January 2020 meeting. Are there any questions or concerns about the survey? It's a standard form that's been used several times. I do have a question, although it's something I like about the survey. I noticed the very last question, and perhaps I just haven't noticed this before, where you ask if someone's interested in being on the instructional materials. Is that a new, or has that always been there? It's always been there? Oh, I
Not new. But when we did standards, that wasn't there because we weren't about to do instructional materials.
I see. Well, I thought that I liked it. Kudos is what I was going to be. I need a motion from an Arts Subject Matter Committee member to recommend that the Instructional Quality Commission approve the survey questions for the online survey that will be posted along with the draft framework.
I move that the Instructional Quality Commission approve the survey.
Thank you. The motion's been made by Commissioner Murphy-Corwin. Is there a second?
I'll second it. Oh, we'll all second it.
It is multiple seconds. To whom who? All right. The motion has been seconded by Commissioner Wu. Is there any discussion of the motion? Are there any commissioners not on the Arts Subject Matter Committee who would like to comment on the motion? Any comments from the State Board Members on the motion? Is there public comment on the motion? I believe we're ready to vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? The motion passes. Thank you, commissioners. Before I adjourn the Arts SMC meeting, are there any other matters not related to the framework that anyone in the Arts SMC would like to discuss? Is there any public comment on matters not related to the framework? I now adjourn the meeting of the Arts Subject Matter Committee. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Chair Tonkovitz. I really appreciated how thorough we were in the evaluation of this. And thank you so much to Seaford staff, to Letty as well. At this time, I don't know about you, but I'm a little hungry. And then also we could use a stretch break. And so to that end, I'd like to propose to the group that maybe we consolidate the stretch break and the lunch, and maybe reconvene 12.
You want to do 1 o'clock? Don't get used to it. Do not get used to it. Don't do it. Don't think that this is ever going to happen again. Just don't. An hour and almost half, and it's actually really good timing to go out for lunch because you'll hit all the area before the rush. So, we're on break for lunch.
Break, yes.
That means don't be late.
Welcome. Yes. Welcome back, everybody. So we're going to continue with our meeting, and so I'm going to hand it over to SMC Chair Naditz to go over the World Language Subject Matter Committee matters.
Thank you so much. I call the World Languages Subject Matter Committee to order. If you are a member of the World Languages SMC, please put your nameplate face up. And if you are not on this committee, please put your nameplate face down. Thank you. I really am very, very excited that we are at this point today. We are taking action on the draft World Languages Framework. The World Languages Curriculum Framework and Evaluation Criteria Committee, or the World Languages CFCC, met for the last time in August and recommended an initial draft of the World Languages Framework to the Instructional Quality Commission. I would like to first thank the writers. Their task was a difficult one. They needed to draft chapters to meet the standards and the guidelines, and then make revisions based on the consensus decisions of the World Languages CFCC, and they did an incredible job. First of all, Christine Lanphier, who is co-director of the Capital World Language Project at CSU Sacramento. She teaches French at Natomas High School in Sacramento, California. Also on our writing team is Tanya Byram. She is the California Language Teachers Association president and teaches World Languages Methodology for CSU East Bay. She has taught ELD and Spanish in TK through 12 and coordinated World Languages credential programs within the CSU, and she is a member of the leadership team at the Occidental World Language Project. Svetlana Lazarova is a teacher of Latin at Palm Springs High School in Palm Springs, California, and she is a member of the leadership team at the Occidental World Language Project as well. And Brandon Zaslow is director of the Occidental World Language Project, and he teaches Spanish and Spanish for Spanish speakers at Granada Hills Charter, TK12 in Granada Hills, California. And today we have Christine Lanphier with us. I look forward to our discussion of the draft framework this afternoon. But first, I've asked Dr. Gregson to provide some context for today's discussion and action. Right?
It's the same as arts. The one thing I would remind us, and this is more for our audience watching, is going back to the purpose of a framework. That the framework is really, it's guidance. There are no mandates within the framework whatsoever. It's guidance for our teachers and administrators on how to help students meet the expectations of the standards, and it's also a professional learning tool for our teachers and administrators. So I would just put out that reminder, but it's in the same process of the arts, so you are looking at moving it forward to its first 60-day public comment period.
We are on exactly the same timeline as the arts framework. Thank you, Dr. Gregson. And now we're going to spend some time going over the guidelines and how the draft framework meets those guidelines. Alejandro Hernandez and Christine Lanfear are going to share with us some highlights from the development of the draft framework.
Yes, good afternoon. So on August 2nd, on the final meeting of the World Languages Framework Committee, the committee members voted unanimously to recommend the draft framework to the IQC on the condition that the revisions that they came to consensus on during the final meeting were incorporated in the draft chapters. The writers have since incorporated all those items, and I want to give the IQC members an idea of what some of the requests were. So I'd like to share two global comments. The first one is, guidance needs to be included on finding placement exams or administering appropriate placement exams. So the writers put those elements in, and CDE staff confirmed that they were put in. A second one is to make sure to equalize the examples given by gender, language, level, and program per the framework guidelines. And of course, the writers did that in the last month. Finally, I'd like to mention that while the Arts Education Framework opted to integrate access and equity strategies throughout the document and not have a separate chapter, the CFCC for the World Languages chose to have both. There is a chapter dedicated to access and equity, and they also chose to embed strategies and guidance to support all learners throughout the document. And I'd like to introduce or present Christine Lanfear, who has been the lead writer, and she's going to share some additional highlights from the current versions of the framework.
Is this on? Let me use this one. Or maybe not. How about if I scoot over? There we go. We have a section called Edit the Task, not the text. So this is edit the placement, not the microphone, apparently. Good afternoon. I'm going to be highlighting a few items just to give you a sense of some of the things that we feel are particularly strong or innovative in this World Languages Framework. You can follow along. I will attempt to give you some line numbers and page numbers, but you don't have to necessarily. And if you would like the details, I can provide those to Alejandro, and he can get those to you at another time. So the first thing that I'd like to highlight is in Chapter 3, which is the chapter entitled Pathways to Multiliteracy, where we really highlighted the different forms of pathways and starting at varying grade levels. Figure 3.2 is a comprehensive, it's on page 6, line 160. It's a comprehensive chart that highlights the ranges, the proficiency outcomes of students who are participating in a variety of different kinds of World Languages pathways and where we might expect them to achieve at the end of the run of that particular pathway. Also in Chapter 3 and Figure 3.3 on pages 8 and 9, we have some guidance on how to move a dual immersion program from elementary to secondary, which is going to be vital going forward. This also represents an initial World Languages roadmap attempt, and hopefully that will be something that will occur following the adoption of the framework. In Chapter 6, which is the Teaching the Communication Standards chapter, on page 27, one of the snapshots that we included is snapshot 6.3, and this is integrating the 3 modes of communication in a single lesson. This is also subtitled Mrs. Avalos, because that is the name of the teacher involved. And in that snapshot, she models a lesson sequence integrating the 3 modes of communication: interpersonal, interpretive, and presentational. And this also incorporates authentic materials, which is a major theme in this framework. Specifically, in this case, the poem El Parque by Elizabeth Millan. In addition to integrating the modes of communication, the snapshot also demonstrates how the teacher helps students access prior knowledge and also emphasizes the making of meaning rather than a hypercritical focus on accuracy. Finally, it also incorporates UDL principles by offering students choice as they are progressing along the lesson through illustrations and eventual summative activities. They have a choice in how they're going to demonstrate their mastery. In Chapter 7, which is the teaching of the culture standards, this entire chapter, I believe, is going to offer an important guidance to support elementary world languages programs, particularly dual immersion programs or pathways, which often lack the culture aspect because they're focusing on content and in the language, but the culture piece is sometimes missing. And we've actually heard that from practitioners in DLI programs, and they're welcoming that guidance. So this is going to be essential guidance for them. Also, it very much focuses on the concepts of products, practices, and perspectives, and goes into great detail with examples and also a discussion of what teachers and students can do with these three important elements of culture. Finally, in Chapter 7, the CGEP global competence indicators and benchmarks are prominently featured, and this also appears prominently throughout the whole world languages framework, but here it's particularly discussed as to how can a teacher implement this with their learners and engage students in learning content with an eye to developing global competence. Finally, I wanted to just encourage you to take a look at the wide variety of snapshots and vignettes that we have included, which we have very much focused on diversity of grade level, proficiency range, language, and even certain snapshots and vignettes that highlight professional learning for teachers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alejandro and Christine. Are there any questions for them about the guidelines and the work that the CFCC did in drafting this framework? I was able to attend several days of the World Languages CFCC meetings and observe their discussions on how to make this framework a document that will be used by teachers and not just sit on a shelf. This is really something that's of personal, critical importance to me, because I know as a world languages practitioner and teacher for many years that there will be places in our state where this framework is going to be the sole guidance that these teachers have. And so the CFCC and the writers worked incredibly hard to make sure that this document is usable, and we're really excited to bring it forward for public comment because we need to hear from the field now about the degree to which this document will work for our profession. And I was very impressed with what I saw and heard. So just a quick summary of what came up for me as I sat in on conversations with the whole group, as well as the breakout sessions that were facilitated by a CDE staff. Thorough research on the part of not only the writers, but also the members of the CFCC, which led to really thoughtful discussions, including discussions that really paid close attention to the many types of world languages programs across the entire grade span. There's things like FLES, foreign languages in the elementary school, which is not the same as dual immersion programs, which is not the same as what world languages programs look like in middle and high school. And then also really being thoughtful about the languages themselves and the wide diversity of languages taught in our state. There was an equity focus throughout the work, constantly. It was a constant thread in these conversations. And then the diligent work of the writers to respond to the CFCC suggestions. So this is leading to what is, for California world language professionals, a groundbreaking document for this profession. And so I would like to now open it up if any other members of the World Languages SMC, I know I had the pleasure of seeing several of you there, if you would like to report on what you observed when you attended meetings.
I did have the opportunity to attend one last year, and the group is just such a dynamic collaborative group. It really, the discipline and the collegiality of how they work together was remarkable. So I wanted to echo. And then again, thank you for the staff. You're working just so well with that group. Just made a great team.
I have to say, the world languages community, I think it is fair to say, has a bit of a reputation now at CDE in terms of collegiality and what it looks like when world languages teachers come together.
And should we note that the entire world language CFCC was female?
It was. It was, yeah.
It was entirely female.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what else to say about that because there's a lot I could say about that, but I'll keep it there.
That wasn't objective or anything, but.
But if I could just add, during one of our meetings, it was International Women's Day.
Yeah.
And we celebrated.
Yes. Do any other members of the World Languages SMC who attended one of the meetings want to report on what you observed?
I did attend one of the meetings, and I kind of wanted to continue attending them because of the collaborative focus that they all had. But they work so diligently and focus in the areas that are so important to our children learning second language learners, but they also brought the perspective of kids taking a second language learners already in that first language. I'm particularly looking at one of the chapters here, but the connections between other interdisciplinary I can't even speak to content, and it was really remarkable how they shared experiences, and that was reflected with their opening. Whatever they started out for the day, there was a real focus of what they were going to learn. So I feel like I was in one of their classes, and I wanted to keep going. I want to thank the CDE staff, too, because they also, through their international cultures themselves, brought into the table, and their professionalism, and the writers who took the patience to listening to them. The way it was organized, there was so much focus and purpose and the meaning behind all this that they were ready to work even after the day was done. And many of them did go back. They talked to their colleagues, got on the phone to gather more input from the field than they really was looking at the whole. So there would be times where they would be, either they lived in Southern California or out in the high desert. They were calling colleagues, can you send? What do you think? And then they were sharing about it. So I think that really is something that all classrooms across the state will benefit from. And this, I think, set the bar really high for all the other curriculum frameworks that are to come. So thank you, guys.
So much. Any other members of the IQC? I'm not sure if any others attended any of the meetings. If you did, if you'd like to share anything. Okay. So I do want to thank you. It was really fun, actually. I enjoyed being with you, those of you who were able to attend the meetings. And I would, hold on one second. And your participation was really appreciated. I think it means a lot to the CFCC and to the writers when they see us. They saw the state board representative at the meetings, and it means a lot to them and to their work and really validates their work. So thank you so much. So before we discuss the draft framework, just like we did with the arts framework, I just want to remind my fellow members of this SMC that we are preparing this draft for its first 60-day public comment period. So our role today is to really propose only those changes that we feel strongly must be made before the public comment period. In addition, it's important to note that the writers have 3 days to complete any edits we request of them. 3. They have 3 days to complete those edits that we approve today. That doesn't mean we shouldn't make edits if they are important, but it's just something to be mindful of. We will have additional opportunities to provide input from ourselves as we move forward, but we're really getting it ready for the public's voice and the public's input on this process. And also, just so you know, I am submitting a list of typos and non-substantive changes or edits directly to CDE staff, so I won't be discussing those here today. But if you found any and wish to submit them, feel free to do so, because we really want to focus on the content of the framework today. I also want to say very quickly, I have a lot of compliments about the framework, and I don't have time to share every compliment that I highlighted, underlined, or flagged in my document. So I think there's one or two I will call out specifically, but please know that that is not all. I was really, really impressed with the work of the CFCC and of the writers. All right, so here we go. We're going to go in order of chapters and ask if there are any suggested changes or edits. Remember that if there is an edit that you are recommending, we do want to make sure that we have specific, clear directions for the writers, and that will be helpful to them in making those edits within that 3-day timeline. So starting with Chapter 1, the introduction to the framework. Is there anything that any members of the World Languages SMC would like to propose? Yes.
So it's not necessarily an edit, it's more of a comment.
Okay.
And I'm going to make it brief, but I know that we always talk about how frameworks are meant to serve as guidance, and this is actually probably the first framework that I truly feel would guide me. I was in a dual immersion school for 3 years, and that was our struggle as an elementary school, figuring so many things out. I went out of my way to kind of just get my own training because I didn't feel like I could support, as an instructional coach, my teachers. And then as I was reading this, it was even at the beginning, from introduction, the fact that the first page already tells me by the end of this chapter, readers should be able to, kind of how we always put, like, I will be successful today if I learned 3 points. So as an educator, this is helpful, but even from the administrative side now, I would love to go back to that dual immersion school just because I have this. So it's a few months too late for me, but now I'm looking forward to. But I'm looking forward to the future because this is exactly what was needed. And I can already see how so many of our struggling programs can benefit from this. So I just wanted to highlight that. Just the setup and the way it's written and the way it's formatted is very helpful.
Thank you. For those of you who might not be able to see what we're talking about, so in this framework, every chapter starts with chapter objectives and then a list of what the chapter readers will learn about.
And page numbers.
And page numbers, which will be forthcoming. Yes. So just want to highlight that. Thank you so much for pointing that out because I actually meant to do so. And it was something that the CFCC discussed thoroughly and that the writers worked on really hard to make sure that that happened. Okay. Anything else on Chapter 1? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I also want to say that it was, in my opinion, really well done, very helpful. But what I'm about to say is just from the perspective of one, and I don't mean but like pejoratively, but rather to help prepare, right, for public comments. I was reading Chapter 1. There's so many initiatives that are related to this framework, and I think obviously it's a good job of capturing all that. But I think it would flow better if we were to take one section and place it before the other. So those two sections that I'm referring to are the following. One is overview of the California World Languages Framework on line 62. And the other one, sorry, my computer keeps jumping around here. Give me 1 second. And the other section is line 163, vision and goals for California's children and youth. And in particular, it struck me that the second section I referred to, the vision and goals, is more general than the first section. And I'm wondering if it may flow better. I know it did for me in my mind. If we were to move the section that currently begins on 163 called vision and goals for California's children and youth and move it right after the intro, but before exactly of the framework. In my mind's eye, it just really helped to capture all of the external initiatives that are happening right now that sort of influence the framework.
Thank you, Commissioner Niguez. I am just checking to see, and so that would continue through, are you proposing that move would start by taking what is currently at line 163 all the way through line, thinking if I'm checking this correctly, line 233, right? And then that would go in the place right after line 61.
Correct.
Just want to make sure I captured the whole section. Thank you. Okay, other SMC members have a comment on that proposed? I think, is that something we would like to see done before it goes out to the public?
Yes, I just think it would help capture
Just wanted to clarify.
Yes,
Thank
the
you.
answer is yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Other comments on Chapter 1? Yes, Commissioner Niguez.
So on line 26 through 29, I found that sentence a little awkward, or more than awkward. For example, as it currently reads, I found myself thinking there's a difference between groups of residents speaking a language other than English as compared to languages other than English spoken by residents. And I'm wondering if we could just make that a little bit clearer. So, for example, I looked and I compared to Chapter 12, lines 17 through 19 and lines 23 through 28 on Chapter 12, in my opinion, speak to the same thing, but it's just a lot more clear and more objective. But it's a suggestion. But what I am saying is, before the public review, I really do think we should clarify lines 26 through 29. And my reference, once again, to Chapter 12 is just as an example of how it's, my opinion, worded a little bit clearer in that chapter.
What are the lines in Chapter 12?
Lines 17 through 19 and lines 23 through 28, Chapter 12. It seems to me that it's capturing the same thing, but it's worded differently. It's what it seems like.
Yeah. And so your recommendation is to essentially mirror how it is worded in Chapter 12?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay. Yes, sir.
Another comment I think would be, I know is important before it goes out to public review, is line 28 of Chapter 1. Given the political climate that exists, there's a term that's used there that I think we need to change, and that is the term resident. And the reason I say that is because this is a framework that's about world languages, and
right.
It's going to take on a specific immigration status context right now, in my opinion, with political. I'm wondering if we could pick a different term.
My question is, if we're using the language from Chapter 12, I believe that might address your concern, because line 28 is one of the lines you recommended changing.
Right, agreed. But the reason I'm pointing it out is because I don't remember off the top of my head if it's also used in another chapter as well. So I just wanted to be cognizant of that.
So you wanted it more as a to look at as a global comment.
Again, particularly in the context of this framework, world languages.
Yes. Point taken. Okay.
So Constantino, did you take note of that as a general edit?
As a global,
searching the.
What would help, I think, do you have a suggestion for what other term we could use?
I was thinking about that, and I could not. I'm just being honest here. I could not come up with one that I think would work. I mean, I understand what we're trying to say here, but it's just so no. I don't have a specific suggestion.
So, for example, if we looking at line 28, although we know that one's going to be changed, but it would probably require a minor rewrite of sentences in which that word. I don't even know how often that word appears in the framework. But for example, if we looked at line 28, it would be other languages spoken include, and then it just removes the reference altogether.
Yeah, I think that if you will allow, I think that would probably take care of it. The term resident doesn't appear really much in anywhere else. This was intended to be just a real big overview of the diversity of languages spoken in California.
So if I recapture that, possibly mirroring more closely the way our diversity is expressed in Chapter 12, and then should the term resident be used in other chapters, because we can do a find for that, and then look at a similar type of edit to what I just proposed in those sentences. Does that make sense for staff and the writers? Thank you.
Sure. And then, just off the top of my head, a suggestion might be Californians, plural, I don't know, as opposed to residents.
And then, do you have any additional comments for Chapter 1?
Yes.
Thank you. Please continue, Commissioner Niguez. Okay.
it won't be like this for every chapter, but it's
Appreciate your
chapter
feedback.
one.
Thank you.
So on line 51, chapter 1, again, given the political climate, the term tolerance may be viewed pejoratively. One doesn't wish to be tolerated because of the language they speak or culture that they choose to observe. So that might lead to a lot of public comments. And I believe that's also used in chapter 2 on line 55. So if you're going to ask for an alternative, we could use something such as language, or rather intercultural appreciation or intercultural proficiency, perhaps.
I think mutual understanding, depending on the context. Exactly. And I feel like, I think it was this framework. I think somewhere else we actually talked about this in in another chapter. It came up. No. I mean, not today. I mean, not today. I think it actually came up elsewhere in the framework during the writing thing that we changed it somewhere else. So I think that goes right in line with what the CFCC and the writers would want to do. Yep.
But in chapter 2, it talks about this movement of folks from tolerance to harmony, right? Isn't that the? So you're trying to contextualize the earlier language in that. Okay, great. And in
later,
chapter
past
2,
line 55 in chapter 2, Commissioner Niguez, they actually specifically say we want people to move along the continuum from tolerance to harmony, like they mentioned it at line 55.
Yes, I read the framework, but nonetheless, I'm saying that term in and of itself could lead, given that it's going to be a public review. I'm just simply trying to save a lot of comments for all of us. So.
Yes. Thank you. I think that comment has been noted. Thank you. Please continue, Commissioner Niguez.
In line 493 of chapter 1. Yes, and my computer keeps jumping around.
Page 19.
493, line 493, yes. I wondering, in terms of the organization, why we mentioned the intended audience again in this section called Organization of the World Language Framework, since we already have a section on line 130 entitled Audiences of the Framework. I don't necessarily mind leaving it there, but simply trying to save or making the chapter a little bit more concise. And then if you look again, just as a comparison's sake, on line 519 of the same chapter, and this section is conclusion, it reads on line 519, quote, guide educators and administrators. And then that in turn, in my opinion, sort of takes away from the previous two references to the intended audiences, because it just seems more limiting there in the conclusion. So wondering, again, why do we have to use the intended or list intended audience twice in two different sections? And then the second question would be, or comment would be, that in the conclusion section, line 15, just seems a little bit more limiting in terms of the intended audience as compared to the previous two references.
If I may, the chart on the annotated for the potential audiences, figure 1.6, was a specific request from the CFCC to include that, to make it a little more potentially user-friendly as far as a quick reference guide almost. As far as your comment on the conclusion, I'm in full agreement. Thank you very much for pointing that out. That I would like to flesh that out a little bit more and be more inclusive of all of the different stakeholders. Thank you.
Well, I'm wondering if you just delete that first sentence and just start with, through this framework, California's world languages educators will benefit.
Also a potential edit. Thank you.
Additional comments on chapter 1? Commissioner Niguez.
So the next comment is in reference to Principle 1 as compared to Principle 2, and those would be on lines 243 and lines 258. You know, I read this and I really wanted to appreciate the substantive difference between the two principles. And I know that there is because I read the entire framework and it's really spelled out in other chapters. But here in this initial chapter, as written, it was, in my opinion, hard to discern what the substantive difference is between the two principles. Both seem to speak in general terms about how speaking a language other than English helps with contributions to and success within economies. You know, for example, Principle 2 speaks to the P21 framework. But it's a comment. It could be that I missed it. If there is a difference, I'm hoping that we could tease it out a little bit between the two principles.
So maybe that's something we look for in the public comment. If there's confusion between the two, or if it's not clear, then we'll hear from the
Good point.
public.
Yep.
Commissioner Negus, do you have additional comments for Chapter 1? Sure.
That's all I have for Chapter 1. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Negus. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness in this work. Are there any other members of the subject matter committee who have a comment on Chapter 1? Any other members of the IQC who would like to make a comment or propose a change for Chapter 1? Okay. State Board? Okay. Thank you. And then do I have to ask? No. Never mind. I don't ask public right now, right? Okay. Thank you. I'm not using the script. Chapter 2. All right. Let's take a look at Chapter 2, Access and Equity for California's World Languages Students. This is the one that is written. It is a chapter, and it's also woven throughout the document. It again starts with the objectives and content. I have certain things flagged that I will simply wait for public comment on, or there are typos that I'm going to submit. But does anyone have suggestions on the SMC for things they think need to be changed before we go to public comment, public review?
I just have a couple of. Is this working? Okay. Yes. Sorry. Can't. I just have a couple. In Figure 2.12 on the framework page 631. In the under the first issue and the practice column of the first issue. So at the very last paragraph of that second column, it says provide students with bilingual paraprofessionals and to support in all subjects. And just for the public, this is in context of supporting newly identified English learners with instructional strategies to help them be successful. I just wanted to perhaps offer that many times in different programs we do, although our paraprofessionals are exceptional educators, oftentimes they are paired with students, and that becomes the way that the access to the content is driven through, and it dismisses the valuable role that the certificated person can play in that partnership. So what I would perhaps suggest for the team or for the committee to consider is rather than have provide students with bilingual paraprofessional for support in all subjects, is to generalize it to include support educators, which would include both certificate and classified, support educators across all content areas to support students in literacy development based on their linguistic need. And then that would put it more on identifying educators to work with an identified and linguistic need versus providing a paraprofessional to follow the student along what it appeared to be in all content areas.
Did you capture the?
Oh, yes.
No.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because it was phrased really well. So.
Okay. Support educators across or in all content areas to support students in literacy development based on their linguistic needs or identified linguistic needs. we've all been with the dark ages where paraprofessionals were with students providing ELD. That just made me like go. I know that was not the intention. But. Okay, and then just another clarification comment again for the field. In that same diagram on page 632, the chart figure proceeds to at risk of becoming LTEL and LTEL status access. So this section is designed to support our students who are long-term English learners, 6 or more years. And so under the second column, the practice, the second paragraph, to add ensure students and then add and their families, because I think that because we want our families to be engaged in the reclassification, understanding what those criteria are for different districts, it's important to include families. So I would recommend just adding and their families after students. And then just another tiny little tweak. The way it reads right now, encourage these students to do their best on high stakes assessments such as LPAC. To me, it weighed on the burden of the student. So understanding that students do need to take responsibility for their learning, we do know that, but maybe shifting that to suggest that we revise it this way: support students and then through high quality instruction to do their best on high stakes assessments, etc. So it puts us as the load bearing support to kids. And then
hold on just one second.
Oh, sorry.
Can I ask something, just piggybacking that I noticed on Commissioner Diaz's comment? I know I'm not on the committee. The comment that you made about the paraprofessionals, it is also listed in the following column. So just to be consistent, since we're in that space, I just wanted to point that out. Whereas in the middle of the paragraph, it says provide primary language support, SEDI, SIOP model, or bilingual paraprofessionals in all subject areas. I just defer to the writer's discretion language, but to support.
I think providing paraprofessionals, in that context could continue to work. It was just read the first section with a concern. It almost read that the paraprofessionals needed to accompany the students. So I think I don't know how the committee feels. I kind of feel like that second one sort of fits like appropriate, but the first one stuck out. But thank you for finding that. And then last, in the third column of that same section under implementation, the last paragraph, it said, ensure ELs are provided ELD and access. Because designated and integrated, and this is the content area, just maybe add, ensure ELs are provided both designated and integrated ELD. And then where it says, and access to complete, perhaps access and then add to grade level grade level content, because a lot of our English learners are not accessing grade level content, particularly in high school, to complete their A through G. So, and access to grade level subjects or grade level content to complete.
Can you repeat the phrasing for that?
Sure. So beginning at the beginning of the sentence, ensure ELs are provided both designated and integrated ELD and access to grade level subjects to complete A through G requirements.
Or content.
Content.
I thought I heard
content. That would work better. That would actually work better.
A through G requirements.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
That's just tightening that up a little bit. That's all. That's it for me.
Thank you, Commissioner Diaz. Other members of the SMC have any comments or proposals? Yes, Commissioner Renteria.
So for me, and maybe this is just we can wait for public comment, but so on figure 2.9 on line 323, I like that all of the areas of concern are summarized, but all the issues are phrased differently. So some of them feel like they have just a little bit of a negative connotation. So students living in poverty generally are in poor health. And then in other areas it says, some students living in poverty may appear to lack effort at school. And then another one, it says low socioeconomic status is associated. So I would just like to see if there's any way that we can just make it consistent so that it doesn't have that negative feeling to it.
So coming from an asset approach?
Yes.
Yes. I think we need to make that edit before it goes out for public comment.
Okay, thank you. Aside from that, I do like the practice of implementation. Just wanted to make sure the issues weren't so generalized. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
this will be one of those revisions that we will make, and then you'll give the authority over to the chair to ensure that the revisions are made prior to go. Yes, because we don't have specific language for each one. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clarified.
Additional comments on Chapter 2? Okay. Members of the IQC who are not on the subject matter committee, do you have any comments for Chapter 2? Okay. Chapter 3, Pathways to Multiliteracy. If it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and start with one right off the bat. I'm going to move to vignette. So there's a vignette and a snapshot in Chapter 3 that are repeated from Chapter 2. They're in both chapters. And I would like to propose that the writers choose the one that they think is the best example and model for our teachers for Chapter 2 and put it in Chapter 2 only, and choose the one that they think is the best model or example for Chapter 3's content for our teachers and put it in Chapter 3 only. And so that's vignette 3.1. And then I can find the numbers in Chapter 2 in a moment. But actually, I might have, no, I didn't. Hold on, let me find it again. And snapshot 3.2. In Chapter 2, snapshot 3.2 is duplicated on line 338. In Chapter 2, I apparently didn't provide the number, but it starts on line 338 in Chapter 2. And vignette 3.1 is the same one that starts on line 681 in Chapter 2. So I think we can probably leave one in one chapter and one in the other.
So which one do you want? In which chapter?
Give me 1 second. So the one in vignette 3.1 is a dual immersion lesson, which fits nicely with the multiliteracy, the pathways to multiliteracy. So my initial instinct is to say leave 3.1 in place and then remove its duplicate in Chapter 2. And then from Chapter 3, remove snapshot 3.2 and leave it in place in Chapter 2. Does that make sense? Does that also make sense to staff and the writer? Okay.
Snapshot number is what again, Commissioner Nates? 3.2?
So we're going to keep vignette. The vignette that was the dual immersion school. Sorry, I just lost my things. There we go. Vignette 3.1, which starts on line 484. That is a dual immersion school, so it's a nice fit for Chapter 3. But it is duplicated in Chapter 2 starting on line 681. I apologize, I don't have what number it is in Chapter 2. But it starts on line 681. And then I would recommend removing it from Chapter 2. Okay. And then remove snapshot 3.2. So you'll just remove that and you can leave it in place where it is in Chapter 2.
So the vignette in Chapter 2 is 2.2.
Thank you. And then I have one more. I would like, there is vignette 3.2. Do you want to get rabid with me? I don't know if my fellow SMC members took a look at this one. I would like to recommend removing it. And if it might not be able to happen in time for the first public comment, so perhaps for the second public review period, it could be replaced with one that highlights how to handle sensitive or controversial topics with authentic resources. This vignette, it is purposeful, and the authentic resource that was chosen is purposeful, but it is particularly violent. And so I am not sure that I am comfortable with that going out for public review. I don't know what my fellow SMC members think about that.
Yeah, of course.
Page 57, line 1548.
Yeah. So the vignette starts on line 1548, and it gives, some context of this lesson that they're doing on violence and how it exists in society. One of the pieces of this vignette that also got to me was not just the authentic resource, which will come up a little bit later on line 1625, but on line, hold on, let me find the thing. There we go. On line 1570, the instructor asks students to write about the type of violence that is common where they live and indicate how it affects their lives. And I thought that was potentially both triggering or potentially perpetuating a stereotype about people living in urban communities. So that piece of the vignette bothered me a little bit. And the authentic story, it has a purpose. It's actually along the lines of theater of the absurd, so it gets more violent with every single line. It's trying to make a point, but it seems to go, in my opinion, beyond what was potentially necessary for.
Your recommendation is to remove it, yes, and then through the process bring back an alternative to
yes,
be included in the framework.
To be included in the framework that will probably be present during the second public review period. I don't, again, do my fellow SMC members have any thoughts on that?
In reading that, I don't necessarily have a problem waiting to see what happens with public comment, but if you feel strongly about it, I have no problem removing it either.
Well, and that's why we're here together. It happened to strike me, but that's why I wanted to make sure we discussed it before any decision was made. So if my fellow SMC members would like to leave it in and see what public comment says, then that's perfectly fine. I just need to know.
In kind of reviewing it, I think there may be another vignette that could engage students in quality text and critical thinking. That does not focus on violence as the pivotal conversation. I'm not sure how that, I could see the application of that, but I think in the context of world language, I'm looking at it from literacy, like multiple literacies. How might we include another vignette that promotes kind of a deeper dive into text and critical thinking and analysis? It may involve something to do with
violence in our communities or
mm-hmm,
right.
But the way it is a little bit narrow focused.
So I actually would prefer if we waited for public comment, only because, so when I first read it, I didn't think of it from that perspective, only because I grew up in an urban school district in LA.
Yeah.
And this is actually something that felt relevant because
Yeah.
I could actually envision it.
And I think that's
we
what
want
the
to be
writers
relevant
felt
with
too.
our students according to the different areas. Violence is something that we have to discuss in our classrooms and
Yes.
in different ways. And I think it's intentional in the way that it's being used.
Okay.
I do think that if public comment comes out and they also mention it, then I'm sure there are other vignettes that can be appropriate, but in this moment, I wouldn't see the need to take it out just yet.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate that perspective, because as I was reading it, I was wondering, as I said, on that one line in around 1570, I wasn't sure if that was, again, not having taught in the same setting. But if it's and it is relevant, and violence is an important topic. It struck me as I read it, and I wasn't sure if I was comfortable with the way it was being approached, not saying we don't need to talk about it. So I am fine leaving it in to wait for what public comment says. Mm-hmm.
Just to note, I think the first part of that vignette has to do with violence, but then the second part has specifically to do with the dog and being bitten, it's sort of, there is a connection like piece that may come out in public comment between the two, throughout the flow of the lesson.
All right, I believe our consensus is to leave it in.
Just no action, then?
No action.
Okay. Just
No
kind of a
action. We will
watch.
let public comment go for that one. And for substantive things that I had, that was all that I had. Waiting on public comment for the rest. Would other members of the subject matter committee like to make any other comments on chapter 3?
Yes, there's I'm going to have to find it on my computer here. Line 55, the beginning.
Yes. The roadmap?
The roadmap, yes. I was just wondering if it would be appropriate to reference, because the California English Learner Roadmap is detailed in Chapter 11, and I'm wondering if it would be good in this, since it refers to that roadmap, providing guidance to districts, perhaps include a sentence that references that the California English Learner Roadmap is also a guidance document being provided to districts, but that more detail is elaborated on in Chapter 11. But that way it kind of gives a little like marker.
We did there was a lot of seeding in the document of just that type.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think that's
And I'm trying to find the place where I would recommend it. It was actually in line. Okay, so line 55. Stakeholders.
Maybe at the end of that sentence.
Yeah, maybe at the end of the sentence. The rest of the sentence, or maybe before the sentence, because then that sentence leads to describing the World Language Roadmap. So before.
In addition to the English language, the English Learner Roadmap, which is further elaborated in Chapter 11, comma.
This chapter
includes a World Languages Roadmap.
Yes, it's perfect.
In addition to the guidance provided in the EL.
In the California EL.
In the California
English
EL
Learner
Roadmap, rather, in addition to the guidance provided in the, yes.
And somehow referencing more information on that is found in Chapter 11.
Right, exactly. As I said before, I was just realizing I needed to add to the beginning of that because we aren't including the EL Roadmap in this chapter per se. So, in addition to the guidance found in the California EL Roadmap, which is elaborated on in Chapter 11,
perfect,
comma, this chapter includes. Thank you. Other comments on Chapter 3? Members of the IQC not on the subject matter committee? Okay. State Board. I've lost the beginning of Chapter 3 completely, so we'll just put that aside. Chapter 4. Okay, Chapter 4, overview of the World Languages Standards. I will say that this is one of the places I do want to highlight a compliment that I had among many compliments I have for this framework. I really appreciate the thoughtful articulation of the many benefits of becoming literate in multiple languages and the emphasis on both the use of the target language and the use of authentic materials. That runs throughout this chapter and in other portions of the document. Would any members of the subject matter committee like to propose any edits for Chapter 4? Members of, Commissioner Diaz.
Sorry, I just have one tiny little edit. On line 214, it describes the Dia de los Muertos. Perhaps we would include, because it's highlighting that Spanish provides access to understanding a very important celebration, but not necessarily every Spanish-speaking country celebrates Dia de los Muertos, so maybe just adding with the celebration of Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead in Mexico. And then that way, it's not assumed that every Spanish-speaking country.
Thank you very much.
Accent on the I.
Other comments for Chapter 4 from the subject matter committee? Comments from members of the IQC not on the committee? State Board representatives? Okay. Chapter 5, implementing high-quality world languages instruction. Any comments from the subject matter committee? Yes, Commissioner Renteria.
So maybe it's just the way it's here, and that's why it's difficult to read. But figure 5.4 on line 253, it's really hard to read the figure, the Sustainable Development Goals. So I don't know if there's just a better way or another graphic.
If I may, this is actually 5.4 is the actual United Nations figure.
That's why I was like, okay, I know it's a...
And it is in color, except here, where it's in grayscale. No. So when it's on an online version, it's going to be a little bit easier to look at. I don't know whether that's just perhaps an issue of making it slightly bigger on the paper. So, yeah.
Yeah, so remember that it's not going to look this way when it goes through its design process.
Okay, perfect. That was it. I'm like, well, I'm just thinking, like, if I'm public comment, I was like, I don't even know what it says. Okay.
Would it help if we just enlarge it? Would you like?
I mean, at least just because.
Or putting it out for public comment.
Yes, because it's really difficult to read it's in color. I see the color, but like no poverty. And I had my glasses on before I tried reading it without.
And you have to remember that everything's going to shift because some things are going to be in boxes on the side, things like that. So this will be larger in the final format.
Okay.
So
and they will make sure that
don't pay too much attention to the graphic size or things like that because that will change.
And they will make sure that they have a version of the graphic with high enough resolution that when they make it bigger, the words don't just get blurry.
Yeah, usually I don't pay attention to the graphic size. It was just this one was difficult to read. Okay, thank you.
And then I just had a question regarding some of these hyperlinks on line 255. Were those already vetted and will they still be in here on this document?
So what we do is we go through a process to ensure that there's no link rot within the entire document. And what happens is that in our frameworks, so you'll click on this link and you'll go to another page and then have to click again to ensure that there's no link rot within the document. So if this link is updated throughout, that will be a constant updating, automatic updating.
Other comments on Chapter 5?
Just one.
Yes.
So on the vignette, it's on line 149. The essential question, the way it's phrased, I don't know why it's bugging me. It says, how do the Chinese stay physically and mentally active? I'm just wondering, because the rest of it talks about different types of sports that not necessarily just the Chinese use to stay physically and mentally active. So I'm wondering if it could be restated, like what recreational and intellectual activities do people in China engage in? Or it just seems, I don't know if it's just me, like, how do the Chinese stay, like, it just maybe not all Chinese people, like it just the way it's phrased, I don't know if it.
Commissioner, would it help if we simply remove the reference to Chinese? For example, how do we stay physically and mentally active?
Yes, that would be much better because it does reference
China.
There's some though that
it is about China, but the essential question can be a more
broader.
global statement.
Yeah, I think that would sit better. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Diaz. Do you have anything additional for Chapter 5? No problem. No. Any other subject matter committee members have anything on Chapter 5? Members of the IQC not on the committee? State Board? Okay. Chapter 6, teaching the communication standards. So we're starting to dive into the specific content standards. And before I say anything, would any members of the SMC like to make any comments on Chapter 6? Okay. The one thing, and this is small, I just want to check with our writer on figure 6.7. It starts at line 404, but then it's a figure, so there's no lines within that. At the bottom of page, I'm on the paper document, bottom of page 23. The last row, the conduct a demonstration or teach a skill such as how to prepare a recipe. Are we sure that's novice? I just want to check on, if we are, that's fine. It's an important distinction because we do have this in our field as far as teachers not sure what things really count as novice activities. So just a question.
And from the from the presentational standpoint, I think I am inclined to agree with you. If it were an interpretive, I would say it could be done where they would actually follow the directions of the thing. Right. But because they're designing the demonstration, unless it
Perhaps
is
with all memorized phrases.
Unless Commissioner Natus, it is, for example, they are imitating.
Yeah,
like they
then
are
it would.
simply doing the thing that they have learned how to do. So,
yeah.
Do you want to? My suggestion almost would be to leave it for public comment, but
no
we
problem.
would make a note of it
To kind of keep an eye on it.
and the writers can discuss this a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to
Because we've had many conversations about, is this really novice? Is this intermediate? Is this advanced?
Just wanted to be sure. And then on, we have some, as was noted, there's a wide variety of vignettes. There's a wide variety of snapshots. They cover virtually the gamut of languages and also ranges of proficiency. However, we do not have one for ASL, and I would like us to add an ASL snapshot, and settings is a really good location for it. It would be settings for communication within ASL language communities. And I recognize it may not happen in time for this initial public review period, but I do think the framework needs to include and represent snapshots or vignettes with ASL. This is one of 3 places I will recommend one. So I think it will fit right after line 597 once we have it. Yes. Yes, it would come at the end of the section of this chapter where they talk about Communication Standard 4 settings for communication.
And just to be clear, you're not requesting that this be completed before the...
If by some miracle they have one, that would be fabulous, but I recognize that that's not likely. So, any other comments from our SMC members on Chapter 6? Members of the IQC not on the committee? No? Okay. Chapter 7, teaching the cultures standard.
Commissioner Natus, could you confirm for us where, where you would like the
Wait, was it 597?
597.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It would go at the end of the explanation about the settings for communication. Thank you. Chapter 7, teaching the culture's standards. I'm going to jump right in and say that this is also where I would like an ASL, in this case, a snapshot, and it will go beautifully. It would become snapshot 7.2. It would begin right before line 281. And again, if you happen by some miracle to have a snapshot in time for the first public review, outstanding. But if not, I do think we need examples of what our standards look like for those who are teaching ASL. Are there any, do you need a line number?
Did you, you mentioned 281.
Oh, right before it.
That's right below another snapshot.
Is that non?
2 snapshots back to back is a little dense because they might, readers may actually jump over
I'll see
the
if I can
second
find
one.
another location. Oh, I did have a suggestion
Okay.
for this snapshot as well. It would be teaching culturally appropriate interaction in ASL.
So maybe there could be an introduction paragraph
Yes.
before the snapshot to separate it a little bit.
Oh, definitely. I just, from a standpoint of sort of salting things throughout the chapter.
Yeah.
I mean, if you would like to leave it up to our discretion as well to on where to put it, but you would want it in the section that's related to. Is this more introductory here? Have we even
So
gotten it?
right before snapshot 7.1 on the previous
In
page,
standard
there's a
one.
short paragraph. Oh, yes, it is standard 1. Culturally appropriate interaction seemed like the best fit for the ASL snapshot for this chapter. If it doesn't go there, I leave it to writer's discretion. Another place that I thought perhaps it could go, although I'm not as sure that I like it there, is right before line 238. There's a narrative explanation of some culturally appropriate interactions in France, but it's not a snapshot. So maybe a snapshot could go right at line 238. In which
And
case
in that
it would be
case,
snapshot
put the
7.1.
ASL one there.
Yeah, and it would be 7.1 and the other one would become 7.2.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other comments?
Commissioner Nadeton,
Yes,
you
sir.
also had the title that you would like.
Culturally appropriate interaction, teaching culturally appropriate interaction in ASL. Thank you. Okay. Do my fellow members of the SMC have any other comments for Chapter 7? Members of the IQC not on the committee? Members of the board? Okay. Thank you. Chapter 8, teaching the connections standards. Okay. As I said, I will submit almost all typos to you, but there is one really, really big section that's basically repeated verbatim, so I just want to go ahead and, did you see it? Okay.
I had the opportunity to meet with some site directors from our project this weekend, and we were looking at things, and they brought it to my attention. Is this the 1314?
No,
okay.
it's not.
That one I am
later.
totally aware
Different
of.
chapter. No, this one start on line 77. In the middle of that paragraph, that starts with the word "of course." If you delete those words and start the sentence with "within every range," blah 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 blah, right? Go to line 85. It also says it's the same exact section. So line 77, within every range and phase of proficiency to be useful. I would recommend just removing from "of course" to the end of that paragraph, and then it's all good.
77 to 83.
Yes, please. Okay. Are there other comments on Chapter 8 from members of the SMC? Members of the IQC not on the committee? Okay, State Board? Thank you. Okay, Chapter 9, Understanding Proficiency Ranges in the World Languages Standards. One thing that I would like to suggest, hold on one second, because I put that goes on here. So on line 203, there's a small explanation leading up to figure 9.4, the phases within each range of proficiency. I would like to edit that opening sentence because there are no phases for the superior range, and I don't want our teachers to think that there is such thing as superior low, because there isn't. So I would like to propose that it says figure 9.4 provides a brief description of the phases within each range of proficiency, comma, from novice through advanced, period. There are no phases for the superior range, period. Do you need me to repeat, or are we good? Repeat? Yes, ma'am. So I'll start at the beginning of the sentence. It says figure 9.4 provides a brief description of the phases within each range of proficiency, comma, from novice through advanced, period. New sentence. There are no phases for the superior range, period. Okay. Yes, Commissioner Diaz.
Yes. I'm just wondering on line 232. Wait, where is it? Okay, I'm sorry. 236. Where it says some linguistic scaffolds include slower speech, high frequency vocabulary cognates, repetition, or exaggerated intonation during instruction. I'm wondering if we could add like a syntactic, like syntactical supports. Yeah, just because it reads slowing it down, saying it louder, but there's linguistic strategies that the teacher can use to focus on the syntax of sentences and still convey high level language supports, but bringing the syntax, so maybe like syntactical supports could be added to kind of bring up the rigor of the list of offerings on the scaffold. And then the other suggestion is in line 238. Scaffolding involves breaking complex text into easier, more manageable steps, perhaps into smaller, like word easy, again, brings down the level, so smaller, or chunks to
Breaking tasks into more manageable steps.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then remove the word easier. I think the word easy is what brings down the rigor.
Can we have a clarification on the syntactical supports? Do you have any specifics that you would like to mention? Because I think the word syntactical supports is going to baffle some people. Do you have a particular example?
Let me think about that. Yeah, yeah, let me think about that.
I was thinking rephrasing.
Yeah.
Also.
Rephrasing.
Syntactical supports, commas, such as rephrasing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any additional comments on Chapter 9 from other members of the SMC? Of course. And from members of the IQC not on the committee?
Just a question. Is it really important to start? I'm going back to the first list of linguistic scaffolds. And that was line, I'm sorry. I'm here, but I can't see it.
Oh, you're on line 234. It says scaffolding.
Okay, my question is is it important to start the list of linguistic scaffolds with slower speech?
Right.
As a person who has been adamant about that's not a scaffold, I'm having a hard time with, I understand, but being the opener in that list.
Would changing slower speech to precise speech
or modified?
Because what I'm thinking of as a teacher myself, when I am actually slowing the delivery. I'm not running words together the way they would in Paris, like suis. I'm saying je suis, but a French person would say je suis, and so on. So would the word precise, as opposed to slower, be an alternative?
Sounds like when you're slowing, that's the purpose of slowing the speech, is to be
or
more
carefully
clear.
enunciated.
Carefully enunciated. Yeah.
Okay.
Clearly enunciated speech.
Clear
yeah.
enunciation.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Clear enunciation fits with the frame of the format of that sentence. Yeah.
We get to delete slower speech.
Yes. Delete slower speech and replace with clear enunciation.
When I hear it,
yeah, all of us do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just could imagine, if you say it louder and slower, they're going to get it. No, that's not what
No. Okay. Are there any other comments on Chapter 9? And we were opened up to the whole IQC at that point. Okay, State Board. Thank you. Chapter 10, Assessing the Learning of World Languages. sorry, put away my chapter. Okay. Assessing the learning of world languages. Do any members of the SMC have any comments for this chapter? I will say this is the final place in the framework where I would love to see an ASL snapshot or vignette of what assessment looks like when it is done in a way that is aligned to our new content standards and to the principles in the framework. I will need to get you a location. I had seen one, so I will have to get you a location for that, but it will, and it would probably be for the second public review period at this point.
That's what I wanted to clarify.
Yes, for the second public review period. And I will get you a location because I'm trying not to back it up against other snapshots and vignettes, but it also fits best where those assessment samples are. So I will have to work on that.
You have time.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other comments from members of the SMC on Chapter 10? Members of the IQC not on the subject matter committee? Okay. State Board? Nope. Okay. Chapter 11, Professional Developments and Support for World Languages Educators. And the only question I have, because I'm not sure if it's a typo, otherwise I would have submitted it later. Line 164, just above snapshot 11.1. And I did read everything before this line and everything after to try to answer this question myself. The last line in that paragraph says they use the following form to collect their thoughts. If there's no form, we can delete the line. Or they use a form to collect their thoughts, period. Just, I wasn't sure if there was supposed to be a form that was included or okay, if there's no form, just change it to a line. Are there any other comments from the SMC on Chapter 11? Members of the IQC not on the SMC? Commissioner Pantai.
Yeah, sorry. I looked at one particular section, and I might have missed this in Chapter 2 as well. It's on page 6, at the top of page 7, interpersonal communication. There's a section on ASL and written communication. I keep thinking about students that I've had in the past that use adaptive technology versus assistive technology. That's also kind of mentioned in Chapter 2, but I would like to clarify that. So if we could go back to Chapter 2 and fix a particular line, then we could also add that to Chapter 11. Sorry to backtrack you, but Chapter 2, if you look at page 71 of 91, line 1301, it says assistive technologies. I'd like to add assistive technologies and adaptive technologies. Adaptive technologies to help specifically students and people with disability. So it gives a little bit more clarity in terms of what support is given.
In Chapter 2,
I'm sorry,
in 1301, are you saying assistive? Should we change it to the use of assistive and adaptive? Is that the word order? So I think I'm about to get to your question. Chapter 2, line 1301, where it says the use of assistive.
We add assistive and adaptive technologies. And then if we go back to Chapter 13, or Chapter 11.
11. Line 108. Line 108, using technology, comma, including assistive and adaptive technologies as appropriate, comma. Sorry, let me rephrase that because the commas need to be specific. Line 108, thank you. Right after the word technology, comma, including assistive and adaptive technologies, comma, as appropriate, comma, because the as appropriate refers to the to other technologies. Yeah. Do you need me to repeat that? Oh, maybe. We just had a suggestion to change the punctuation, same words, different punctuation. Technology, open parentheses, including assistive and adaptive technologies, close parentheses, as appropriate, which is already there. The as appropriate's already there.
Both chapters or just
No, in
just
chapter
one?
2, because of the way the sentence is phrased in chapter 2, it's not needed. Only in chapter 11, after the word technology in line 108, open parentheses, including assistive and adaptive technologies, close parentheses. Thank you, Commissioner Ponte. Do we have other comments on chapter 11? Members of the IQC not on the committee? State board? No. Okay. Chapter 12, unique features of individual languages. Do members of this SMC have any comments on chapter 12? Members of the IQC not on the subject matter committee? Okay. All right. State board does not. Okay. Chapter 13, instructional materials. Do members of the SMC have any comments on chapter 13? Members of the IQC not on the committee? Yes. Commissioner Tonkovich.
And since we're paralleling the arts, do you notice on lines 249 and 268, it uses the phrase at risk? And since we're waiting for the governor's signature, I suggest we put at promise.
So I did catch the line 2, and my copy it's 249. So copies print
249
differently
and
sometimes.
268.
So there are 2 of them. So changing at risk or being ready to change, or changing it to at promise.
Well, if you the arts have it as
at promise already, then we have precedent at promise. And what was the second line where you found it?
Oh, 268.
268. Thank you. Yes. Also at line 268.
And just to clarify, the change was not made in the other framework. The comment was to wait for the legislation to pass. But
That's what yes. So it is an edit that we might foresee if that legislation is signed.
Right, that we might foresee.
I thought it was at promise in our draft right now. It's not?
No. It appears, the term appears once in the framework and it's at risk.
But I appreciate that because we'll need to keep an eye on it for this framework as well and follow that legislation. And then we will make that edit as necessary, assuming that it's passed before we have to print. Right. Other comments on Chapter 13, instructional materials, from anyone on the IQC? Okay. Chapter 14, the glossary. Any comments from the subject matter committee? Members of the IQC not on the committee? Okay. All right, give me just 1 second. Okay. Oh, thank you. I was about to read it before I did anything else. Okay. So at this point, we have come to agreement, and I want to thank the commissioners, our state board members, for your comments and suggestions. They have really taken great steps towards making sure that even in this first public review period, this is the strongest document possible. And we have come to agreement on a number of changes to the draft framework. Before we take formal action on the decisions we have made, we will now hear public comments. Are there any members of the public who would like to provide comment on the draft framework or any of the issues we have discussed in this World Languages Subject Matter Committee? Okay. Okay. And before we move on, I did check the red folder. There are no public comments that are relevant to world languages. So before we move on to this moment when we take formal action to recommend the draft framework, Are there any other issues that the subject matter committee would like to reopen for discussion in any way before we take action? Okay. All right. I believe we're ready to take action on the draft framework. There will be two motions. The first will be to recommend the draft framework to the full IQC, and the second will be to ask the full IQC to delegate the chair and vice chair of this SMC to work with staff and the writers as they make the changes that are approved by the commission. Do we need to summarize the changes before we make a motion? Would you prefer not? Are we clear?
Because it is a long list, we will ensure, we will go back and listen to the audio and the video and make sure that we have everything. But I think between the three of us, we are sure to have everything.
And I think, and the members of the SMC are also clear on what it is that we've agreed upon. Okay. So I need a motion from a World Languages Subject Matter Committee member to recommend the draft framework to the Instructional Quality Commission for its first 60-day public review and comment period with the changes we have agreed to today.
So move.
It has been made by Commissioner Renteria. Do we have a second?
I second.
Seconded by Commissioner Diaz. Is there any discussion on the motion? Would any commissioners not on the World Languages Subject Matter Committee like to comment on the motion? Comments from the State Board Liaison?
I just want to personally thank each of you, and especially our lead, on the thoughtful review and comments to try to strengthen a really strong draft. And I look forward to the process with the public comments coming up, but I just want to thank you all for trying to make this a really usable and reader-friendly document. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Strauss. Is there any public comment on the motion? Hearing none, I believe we are ready to vote. Remember that only members of the World Languages Subject Matter Committee can vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. I would like to make a motion to ask the full Instructional Quality Commission to delegate to the chair and vice chair of the World Languages Subject Matter Committee the review and approval of the agreed upon changes to the draft framework, as well as any minor edits identified by the staff or writers, such as grammar, punctuation, order, and citations, before the draft framework is sent out for its first 60-day public review and comment period. Well, it said I was making the motion, so the motion has been... Oh, I would like a motion. I apologize. I was like, I would like to? I was like, I read it wrong. Okay. My apologies. I would like to and need a motion to delegate that work to the chair and vice chair of this committee. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It has been moved by Commissioner Munoz. Is there a second?
A second.
It has been seconded by both Chapman and Pontai. Is there any discussion? Any comments from the State Board Liaison? Any public comment? I believe we are ready to vote. Only members of the World Languages Subject Matter Committee can vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Does anyone need to abstain from voting? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you so much. I would like to personally thank the writers. I didn't get a chance to do that earlier for their incredible work that they have done to create this framework. And I am personally very proud of this framework. This has been a dream of mine, as some of you know, for a very long time. And I appreciate the vision for world languages education that you have articulated. I also would like to express my appreciation to the Seaford staff. For those of you who've never watched a framework process in action, the work they do to support the development is incredible. Dr. Gregson, you provided outstanding support in getting the framework to this point in its development. And as the Deputy Superintendent of the Instruction and Measurement Branch, I know you'll continue to provide leadership and support for our ongoing work on the framework. I would also like to thank Alejandro Hernandez, who has been the lead consultant for the World Languages Standards and this framework and has skillfully managed the development process, and Constantino Silva, the administrator of the Curriculum Frameworks Unit, for his leadership and support in this process. He and Alejandro will see this framework through to its adoption by the State Board of Education. And the work of all the Seaford staff, every single member, and this is true, I'm sure, of the arts as well, of the CFCC had multiple meaningful opportunities for input and even to consider every bit of input given by other members. The process is really remarkable. So I want to recognize all the members of the Seaford team who worked so well together to support us in this work. Would anybody else like to make a comment? Okay, we're out. All right, we do have one last piece of business. I'm not quite out. We need to take action on the survey that will be posted on the CDE webpage along with the draft framework. This online survey will allow survey users to provide written comments on the draft chapters and respond to questions regarding the draft world languages framework. Survey users can respond to as many or as few questions as they choose, and the comments received during the 60-day field review will be compiled by Seaford staff and presented to the World Languages SMC and the IQC for consideration. Are there any questions about the survey? Okay. I need a motion from the World Languages Subject Matter Committee member to recommend that the Instructional Quality Commission approve the survey questions for the online survey that will be posted along with the draft framework.
So moved.
Perfect. Motion has been made by Commissioner Williamson and seconded by Renteria. Is there any discussion? Okay. Are there any commissioners not on the World Languages Subject Matter Committee who would like to comment? State Board Liaison? Is there any public comment on the motion? Okay. I believe we are ready to vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Thank you very much, commissioners. Before I adjourn the World Languages Subject Matter Committee meeting, are there any other matters not related to the framework that anyone on the World Languages SMC would like to discuss? Is there any public comment on matters not related to the framework? Okay. I adjourn this meeting of the World Languages Subject Matter Committee. Thank you so much.
Yay. Thank you so much. At this time, we're going to take a brief 10-minute break and resume at 2:45. All right. Is everyone back? Yeah. Okay. Well, welcome back, everybody, from our break. At this time, we're going to continue with our meeting, and the next item on our agenda is to open the Health Subject Matter Committee, and so I'm going to hand it over to SMC Chair Wu.
Okay. I call the Health SMC to order. If you are a member of the Health SMC, please put your nameplate face up. If you're not on the committee, please place it face down. The members of the committee are myself, Vice Chair Fairchild, Commissioners Chapman, Costa Hernandez, Iniguez, Lara, Tonkovich, and of course IQC Chair Chow. The Seaford staff to the Health SMC are Jennifer Bentley, Education Programs Assistant, and Cliff Rudnick, our Administrator. You will recall that we had an update on the adoption at our last meeting. Our task today is to make recommendations to the full commission on the instructional materials reviewers and content review experts. The item was provided to us digitally, so I hope you all had a chance to review it. The full IQC will take action on these items to recommend them to the State Board for final action at its November 2019 meeting. Okay. The item that requires our action is the recommendation of the candidates for reviewers for the 2020 health adoption. For the purpose of this discussion, reviewers include instructional materials reviewers and content review experts. Both of these reviewers serve on panels together and review the same materials, but CREs are required to have a doctoral degree in health or another health-related area. The California Code of Regulations, Title V, Section 9512A, authorizes the State Board to appoint these reviewers to serve in advisory capacity to the IQC and Board during the adoption of instructional materials. To help us with this item, Jennifer Bentley of the CDE staff will facilitate our discussion of the applicants.
Each of you received the applications and resumes that were received during the recruitment period that began on April 1st and concluded on August 15th. The personal contact information was redacted from the applications and resumes. We received a total of 69 applications to serve as instructional materials reviewers and 7 applications to serve as content review experts. You have each been supplied with access to electronic files of all the applications and resumes. In addition, a binder with the complete set of applications is in the back of the room for public access. We anticipate we will need up to 5 review panels with approximately 8 to 10 reviewers per panel. While Title V regulations specify that each panel will include at least 1 CRE, we only received 3 qualified applications for CRE. Taking into account the usual attrition that occurs, we estimate that we will need approximately 50 reviewers for this adoption. CDE has conducted an analysis of all the applications and resumes submitted during the application period. Based on this analysis, CDE is recommending 54 applicants, including 3 CREs. The recommended applicants have a wide range of teaching experience and represent a range of geographic origin, ethnic background when stated, and genders. We included a demographic analysis with the applications that addresses these points. Please remember that the final number of panels will depend upon how many publishers elect to participate. Title V regulations require that a majority of IMRs appointed by the state board be classroom teachers at the time of appointment with expertise in the subject area of the adoption. To assist you in making your decision, we have identified the classroom teachers in the CDE recommendations. The regulations also require that at least 1 IMR have expertise in teaching English learners and at least 1 have expertise in teaching students with disabilities. This requirement will be met without difficulty. The applications included a place for reviewers to indicate where they have a potential conflict of interest. In previous adoptions, CDE has consulted with its attorneys to review applications that disclosed potential conflicts of interest. In order to serve as an IMR or CRE, appointees must not have a disqualifying interest in a publishing company pursuant to the California Code of Regulations, Title II, Section 18730. The requirement most relevant to this adoption is that no IMR or CRE should receive any income from a publishing company in excess of $500 for the 12 months prior to when they will make their recommendations on the program submitted for adoption. We reviewed the applications for potential conflicts of interest that would need to be reviewed by the CDE legal office, and there were none. Commissioners, please refer to the candidates by number during the discussion. If you have any questions, I am here to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Are there any commissioner comments on these recommended candidates or any other application that we accessed digitally?
I just wanted to note for the commissioners that we did receive 3 public comments related to this item, and they should be in your red action folder.
Yeah, I looked at the public comments in the red action folder, and they were all recommending that we do include certain people, all of whom were already on the list to be included, so we don't necessarily need to take action on that. You recommended a total of 54 people, and we need 50, so you want us to pare it down a little bit? There were a few people I was willing to pull off, so.
That is completely up to you. With attrition, we started a little bit higher than what we needed, just in case some reviewers were unavailable.
Okay. Yeah.
Just a general question before we begin. What do we do when there's a discrepancy as we are reading through the applications and resumes? If there's a discrepancy, say, for example, in position between what they write in the application versus the resume, I noticed that at least once or twice. I'm sure other people did as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just curious, how do we reconcile that? Do we go with the answer inputted on the application or the resume?
I guess we have to discuss that and decide. So if you made notes on those particular ones, we can discuss those particular people. There were a couple, let's see, I have 3 that I definitely had issues with, or that I just don't feel are necessary to our list. And then a few others that we could discuss. I would like to remove from the list number 10 and number 27. They definitely do not have health as any particular experience. So. 10. Yeah, sorry, they're totally out of order, which doesn't help. Number 10 is about 5 down on the second page, and number 27 is the very last one listed.
I simply wanted to say I concur. I came to that same conclusion in looking at the background, and that was part of why I was asking in terms of trying to reconcile.
Mm-hmm.
I concur with your suggestion.
Okay.
As do I.
Okay, great.
Same here. May I? Number 55. And
Finding it.
I'm actually looking at the list with the recommended. Okay.
It's about
Yeah.
a third from the bottom on the first page.
Yes.
Yeah, that one was one of my yellow highlights of we could go either way, so we can remove 55 as well. And then I wanted to discuss with you number 43, which is 4 from the bottom of the recommended list. This reviewer, he's the one who didn't finish. Sorry, he's male. Didn't finish the application and put notes that the application was previously sent, but I heard from Cliff that there was no other application sent, so we didn't get all the things. On the other side of it, he was a member of the CFCC, so he definitely knows the framework. Oh, he listed himself as a member of the CFCC. Okay, so I think we should remove 43.
He was part of the standards.
Oh, it's the standards.
Standards, yes, but not the health
standards, not
framework.
okay. So yeah, we should probably remove 43 because there was not enough information on that one. So that pulls off 4. Were there any others that were red flags for anybody?
It's not
Commissioner
a red
Tonkovich?
flag. But I want to point out 2 positives because 2 of the filters I always look for is, as you know, NBCTs. We have 1 health NBCT, and there's only 12 in the state, yourself being one.
Mhm.
And the other was a PE NBCT, which is only like 120. So
Okay.
I'm happy that they're going to remain on the list.
Yeah.
May I ask how strict do we have to be about our experts as far as their educational degrees?
The CREs.
Because there is one person, let's see, it is
number 25.
Number 25. And number 25 has a PhD
in pedagogy.
Yes, but number 25 has also been a lead health education consultant for the California Health Education Standards at the California Department of Education. And a committee member, the number 25 was also a committee member on the revised National Health Education Standards Writing Committee. I would think that person might qualify unless you're really strict.
The CRE specifically states it has to have a PhD in a health content standard.
Yeah, it has to be the content area.
Yeah.
But
But
they may have
that said-
applied as a CRE, but we qualify them as an instructional material reviewer versus a CRE.
That said, if we have 3 CREs, if we have 5 groupings, put that reviewer on one of the other 4, and also number 51, which is 2 below that. She doesn't have a PhD, but she has a master's in sexual education. So she also could be a backup CRE that's not an official CRE.
And if I could note once again for the commission that the CREs and IMRs serve in the
They do
same
the same.
capacity on the panel. They will all review the materials and they will all take an equal vote at deliberations.
Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. What page are they on?
Page 4 in the middle.
These not being in order is what it's 33 we're looking for,
So they're in alphabetical order by name.
which is we're not allowed to use.
Exactly.
So
If you do a search by the number, it'll on the search box.
oh, found it. Okay, yes. That was another one that I had highlighted as a.
While they have health experience,
There's no
wasn't
teaching
sure
experience.
about the engaging with. Right.
Yeah, 33. Yeah.
So the reason why we were recommending this candidate is because of their health experience as a nurse.
Right.
Because we felt that that would be a good balance because we don't have a lot of school nurses. And so having another nurse balances out the reviewers. So we can balance out the higher grades. With
I'm
more
okay. I
nurses.
just wanted to have a discussion on it. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from SMC members?
So using ID number 6.
I
don't know if this is working or not. I am on the fence about this candidate. As I understand it, based on the application, this person has worked as a math tutor, not necessarily teacher, and then an assistant at a community college level. But again, in math. And from what I gather here in terms of the resume, the positions are vague. I don't know if that means he interacts with young adults or just adults all day. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, what are the qualifications for this particular
My notes on this
IMR?
one is that they are currently working in a children's hospital with trans youth and doing research on transgender youth, which puts them right into our bullywag.
Well, sure, I can see that, but all I'm saying is, and I'm not saying no, what I'm saying is it's hard to discern whether or not he's doing research or if he's directly interacting.
Okay.
Right, as opposed, because he does, I'm sorry, this person does list, for example, as one of the positions, data entry clerk. So I understand what you're saying and why that particular background would qualify someone, but I am wondering out loud, and I'm not saying no to this person, I'm wondering out loud how much they actually interact. But it's just a question.
Does anyone else have issues with this particular applicant?
No, I think when we're looking at how many people we need pending committee appointments, those decisions can be made.
Yes, so right now, it looks like you're recommending 4 reviewers to be deleted from the recommended list. That leaves us with exactly as 50. So if you are in debate about any other reviewers, you would have to switch out with another reviewer you have already determined to delete from the list.
Okay. And I would put this person at a higher than those, so we'll probably just leave it.
So at this point, you just need to decide if these are the 4 that you're comfortable with deleting and the 50 that you're comfortable with recommending to the state board.
Just for clarification, Commissioner Wu, you said I would put this person at a higher, which number are you referring to?
The one we were just
Number 6?
discussing, I would say we'd keep.
Number
we'd go
6?
ahead and keep them, yeah.
Number 6.
May I make just a general comment? I'm not asking to delete anyone. I did, though, in my review, notice that we have 3 candidates who come from the same exact facility. I would just, I'm sure you'd probably do it anyway, but I would just make a note that these people should be on in different groups and not together.
Yes, that's an automatic.
Awesome. Thank you.
We actually, when we are creating our panels, we have a card system that has the details, and we ensure that we have panels that are representative of the applicant pool as a total, and also the experience that we need at the individual grade levels.
Great. Yes, Miss.
I have the
Yes.
list.
Yeah.
So number 10, number 27, number 55, and number 43.
Okay. Any other further comment from SMC members? Are we all okay with the 50 we're sending forward and the, okay? All right, where am I? So, I need a motion from a member of the Health Subject Matter Committee to recommend all of the IMR and CRE applicants, as just noted by staff, to the full Instructional Quality Commission. Come on, guys, somebody's got to do it.
So moved.
So moved. Sorry.
Oh, now I've got two.
Second.
Okay. It has been, where was I here?
You guys can do it. Come on.
Second.
One more item after
Okay,
this. We got
okay.
this.
I can't remember who did
So
it.
move.
So moved. Okay. So Commissioner Fairchild has moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. And Commissioner Costa Hernandez has seconded it. Is there any discussion on the motion? Final comments from commissioners? Okay. Is there any public comment on the motion? Please note that this comment should only be on the applicants that we have discussed today. Okay. We will now vote on the motion before the committee. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, commissioners. Is there any public comment on items for the Health Subject Matter Committee? Okay, then I close the meeting of the Health Subject Matter Committee.
Okay. At this time, I call the Mathematics Subcommittee to order. If you are a member of the Mathematics SMC, please put your nameplate face up, and if you are not on this committee, please place your nameplate face down. The members include myself, SMC Vice Chair Iniguez, Commissioners Costa Hernandez, Diaz, Munoz, Renteria, Williamson, and IQC Chair Chow. Seaford staff to the Mathematics SMC are Jonathan Lee, Consultant, and Constantino Silva, Administrator. So our first item is to get an update on the mathematics focus group meetings and public comment received regarding the revision of the mathematics framework. Today, the CDE staff are providing us with an update on the focus group meetings and public comment received regarding the revision of the 2021 revision of the mathematics framework. In August, the CDE convened 4 regional focus groups to gather input on what guidance and information should be included in the revised framework. CDE staff are currently compiling the comments received at the focus group meetings and via email, and will produce a focus group report that incorporates both written and oral comments received during that time. These comments will be the basis for the draft guidelines that will direct the work of the Mathematics Curriculum Framework and Evaluation Criteria Committee. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Gregson.
Great, thank you. So this is really exciting time. I'm sorry that Board Member Rucker is not sitting there because because she started with the Instructional Quality Commission with the first ever California mathematics frameworks aligned with the California Common Core State Standards in Mathematics. So here we are again, 8 years later. We've learned so much. We have learned so much since the adoption of the standards and through our struggles as teachers and administrators in supporting the implementation of those standards. And so it is really good timing. I think it's very relevant right now that we are taking on the revision of the California mathematics framework because we've learned so much and there's so much current research out there on that new learning.
And the focus groups are probably one of my most favorite parts of the framework process because our staff, we get to go around across the state and visit teachers. We get to sit and listen and learn from teachers. And so I know Jonathan, who is a new consultant in the Curriculum Frameworks and Instructional Resources Division, is going to be going through some of those elements of the focus groups. But it's just a really exciting time, and I'm very excited that we get to start this process. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to our CDE staff.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. 4 focus group meetings with current math educators were held in the month of August. CDE staff facilitated discussions around 5 questions related to the current mathematics framework. We've provided you with copies of the questions in your red folders. We also have copies out in the back table for members of the public. So I'm going to give you just a half minute to go ahead and review those questions, and I'll continue. All right, I'll go ahead. Also, to mention that those questions are posted on the Math Frameworks webpage. The questions were designed to solicit actionable feedback that would inform the revision guidelines. And we're in the process of compiling that feedback that we received. The full report will be submitted to you in November at the IQC meeting. But here are just some of the highlights from the focus groups. One is that the framework is very positive. It was received very positively in each of the groups. And it's a powerful tool that helps inform educators' practice. It's filled with useful information that helps teachers implement the California Common Core state standards. We had numerous comments that stated that the framework was very robust in the K-8 arenas. More in-depth guidance would be helpful for high school classes, and that's the classes algebra and above. That was mentioned at all 4 of the focus groups as well. Valuable information that we have in our appendices currently. It would be better utilized if it were embedded in the grade level chapters. We have multiple teachers who mentioned how in the heat of the moment, teachers look at their grade level and don't get to the appendices in the back. So if we can embed that information, it would be more actionable and effective for them. There's a strong desire to update the framework to incorporate recent educational research and best practices. More guidance to address the issue of traditional versus integrated pathways in math, as well as talking about compacted or accelerated classes in middle school. That came up in also all 4 of our groups. And we'll continue to work on the final focus group report and guidelines for the framework revision of the CFCC. We're also really excited to inform you that in the coming weeks, we'll be conducting student focus groups for the first time. With the help of the Sacramento County Office of Ed, we've lined up 4 meetings with students from 2nd grade through 12th grade. The meetings will be 30 to 40-minute discussions with teachers and their students. And the students will be asked to speak on times when they were successful or unsuccessful in math and what they attribute that success or lack of success to. And we also look very much forward to getting their take on the impact of technology in math instruction. And I think one of the neat things is, having been in the classroom for a long time, it's always good to get back to our end users to find out what's really happening. The information from the student focus groups will also be used in the focus group report to help to inform the guidelines for the revision that will be used with the Math CFCC when they begin their work starting in February. We look forward to presenting all these results to you in our November report, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
I just wanted to highlight the student focus group piece because this is new. This is the first time we were ever doing this for a framework, so it's very exciting. I also think it was extremely critical to do because, as we know in teaching math, students' mindsets around their success in math is absolutely critical. So we really wanted to hear from them about what helps them be successful in a math class. So that is the reason why, one of the main reasons why we are conducting these student focus groups.
Can I just ask, how did those focus groups get determined and where will they be at so that would we be able to attend?
So the student focus groups were, as Jonathan outlined, we are partnering with the Sacramento County Office of Education, and it's during the school day. We're coordinating it with the teachers. We are doing this kind of in a closed type of group because it is students and we want to be respectful of student privacy and also respectful of the school itself where we are visiting. So we are not really advertising the locations and the dates and everything because we want to be respectful of the instructional day for the teachers and the students.
I'm really encouraged to hear about this additional opportunity to hear the student voice. From this to our new student commissioner, and that's new and encouraging and really exciting. So thank you. This is great.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I'm too excited that we are really thinking about student mindset in regards to mathematics because sometimes it is one of the largest barriers that kids have in regards to being successful in that area. I also was able to attend one of the focus groups in Fresno that was teleconference from Santa Clara County Office of Education. And I heard so many wonderful recommendations and commendations. And I want to highlight that is that this is a tool that teachers are truly using when it comes to that mathematic framework. And the people that we heard had so many positive things to say, and it's just going to be in a matter of refining and tuning that document. You know, one of the things that they highlighted was expanding those vignettes such as we have in the science framework. So they saw that work in the science framework and they want to see it in our math framework. Really emphasizing those mathematical practices by tying them to the standards and making that a little bit clearer for our educators. And identifying what we can do to support our students in special populations within the framework, not as a separate chapter. They really want to see those strategies and resources, manipulatives, text, the digital tools, all in there as they're looking at the standards and how they're to be addressed. They also want to see a highlight on more open-ended tasks as they're seeing how that can really improve student achievement and having those level descriptors put out there for them so that we can keep our teachers looking at the rigor that is expected for them. And, you know, little tweaks as they really want us to emphasize fluency and what that looks like in the classroom for them because I think they've lost a little bit of that. In addition, in our secondary program, again, they want us to revisit that pacing and help them prioritize those essential standards. So really, really wonderful conversations. And I know that Commissioner Costa Hernandez and also Commissioner Munoz were also able to attend focus groups. Do you ladies have anything to share?
I can share a little bit of San Diego. San Diego was the first one, right? So first of all, echo a lot of the comments that you mentioned. What a smart group of people. I was not surprised, but I was in awe that I was watching this discussion. Very smart group of people, really masterfully facilitated by the team. Because people get passionate about the topic of their expertise and they can go on forever. And we had some questions to get through. So the feedback one of the things that I remember, and many of the things that you mentioned were brought up, though the framework was recognized as an important tool, there were some comments about some teachers still don't know there was a framework for math, right? And so they, at least in this group, they wanted to make sure that we have a very robust implementation plan for when the framework is done. That was that kept coming up for me. You were there too, right? That it's such an important tool with so many resources in it. They want to make sure all teachers have access to those tools so that, they said this work on the implementation of it.
That came up at all 4 meetings. They all wanted to make sure that we got it out because they thought it was such a powerful document that they want all the teachers to have access to it and be familiar with it. So one teacher called it her Bible, which was the highest compliment. It's like, that's how she does her work. So it's great.
I attended the Baldwin Park focus group, and I was amazed because these teachers came from, I think one was from Imperial Valley and the other one came as far as Bakersfield to attend the meetings because LA is so big. But they also were talking about the importance of the mathematical practices, how it is extremely important that those practices be taught and teachers understand them and that kids know how to apply them. There was also some talk about content standards in terms of teachers getting the professional development that they need in order to meet the standards and also to meet the rigor as they teach the practices to the students. But everything else that the other two said, I also heard as well. And they're pretty excited. Let me tell you, they can't wait for the new math to come out.
They certainly do. Somebody said in our group, this should be the first place our teachers go, not textbooks, the first place. So thank you both for sharing. I know. Thank you both for sharing your comments today and attending those focus group meetings. Being present at focus group meetings gives us our valuable firsthand knowledge and insight into the teachers' recommendations for the revision of our framework, and it's pretty exciting work. So are there any questions about the focus group meetings at this time? Okay. So now we're going to move into recommending recommendations in regards to, The second item on our mathematics SMC today is the discussion regarding the state board's revision to the schedule of significant events, also referred to as the timeline for the revision of the mathematics framework. It's on a blue paper in your red folder if you'd like to refer to it. And so at this time, Dr. Gregson, do you want to review that with us?
Yeah, so if you will take out the blue folder, last week I went to the State Board of Education and asked them for the gift of time, because we felt that it was very necessary to ensure that we had a curriculum framework and evaluation criteria committee that was really well balanced and represents all of the needs that will come from these focus groups and our student focus groups. And so because of that, we needed more time to bring our recommendations to the Instructional Quality Commission, to the State Board of Education. So you'll notice that there is a specific change. So instead of seeing our recommendations today, you will see them at your November meeting. You'll also see the focus group report and our recommended guidelines. So you'll see all of those three things in November. And then State Board will take action on the guidelines and the recommended CFCC members at their January meetings. So nothing has changed with the CFCC meetings. All 6 of them are still scheduled as is, so February through August. But what you will notice if you turn it over, you'll see that we have now a range of dates. So instead, for the first draft, it may come in September or November, just depending on what revisions we need to make after the CFCC is done with their work. We're just wanting more time in between all of these events and the actions to ensure that we are bringing a high quality product. We feel that this is extremely important and a lesson that we learn from our world languages and our arch frameworks, as you see the tight timeline. So, it's always about continuous improvement, right? We learn, we change, we adjust. And so that is why you see just the range of dates. So it may be coming January or March. It does not really truly affect the final year that the math framework will be adopted. It may be May or July, but still in 2021. Okay. So are there any questions on the revised timeline? You'll see this happening as we move forward in other framework revisions, allowing us a little bit more time in between the different actions and our work with the different committees, just because we want to ensure that we have the opportunity to get those things right. Okay? Our teachers and students deserve that.
Thank you. Would any of the members of the Mathematics SMC like to make any comments at this time? Okay. We look forward to receiving the Mathematics CFCC applicant information and making our recommendations to the State Board at our meeting in November. At this time, is there any public comment? All right. If none, we will close this meeting of the Mathematics SMC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Chapman. At this time, we're going to reconvene the full commission and move on to our next agenda item, where we're going to go over the reports and actions from the subcommittees for the full IQC to consider. And so we'll start first with arts, the Arts Subject Matter Committee, and I'm going to hand it over to Commissioner Tonkovich.
Thank you. As chair of the Arts SMC, I'd like to move to approve the draft SART framework for the first 60-day public review and comment period with the suggested edits on which we reached consensus.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
I second.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Tonkovich has moved and Commissioner Murphy-Corwin has seconded the motion. Is there any discussion? Any public comment on this item? So then at this time, I'd like to call for a vote on this motion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Then the motion passes. Go for it.
Pointing. As chair of the Arts SMC, I move that the full IQC delegate to the Arts SMC chair and vice chair the review and approval of the agreed upon changes to the draft framework, as well as any minor edits identified by staff or the writers, for example, grammar, punctuation, word order, citations, before the framework is sent out for its first 60-day public review and comment period.
Is there a second to this motion?
I second.
Oh, thank you. Commissioner Tonkovich has moved and Commissioner Murphy-Corwin has seconded the motion. Is there any discussion? Okay, any public comment on this item? Then at this time, I'd like to call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Then the motion passes.
As chair of the Arts SMC, I move to approve the questions for the online survey that will be posted along with the draft framework when it is posted for the first 60-day public review and comment period scheduled from October 1st through December 1st, 2019.
Is there a second to the motion?
I will second.
Thank you. Commissioner Tonkovich has moved and Commissioner Murphy-Corwin has seconded this motion. Is there any discussion from the group? Okay. Any public comment on this item? Then at this time, I'd like to call for a vote on this motion. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Then this motion passes as well. Okay, we're going to move to Commissioner Needitz.
Okay, thank you. As chair of the World Languages Subject Matter Committee, I move to approve the draft World Languages framework for the first 60-day public review and comment period with the suggested edits on which we reached consensus.
Is there a second to this motion? Great. Commissioner Needitz has moved and Commissioner Williamson has seconded this motion. Is there any discussion? Okay. Any public comment on this item? Okay. I'd like to call for a vote on this motion. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Then this motion passes.
As chair of the World Languages Subject Matter Committee, I move that the full IQC delegate to the World Languages SMC chair and vice chair the review and approval of the agreed upon changes to the draft framework, as well as any minor edits identified by staff or writers before the framework is sent out for its first 60-day public review and comment period.
Is there a second? Thank you so much. Commissioner Naditz has moved and Commissioner Williamson has seconded this motion. Is there any discussion on this motion from the group? Okay, any public comment on this item? Okay, then I'd like to call for a vote on this motion. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Then this motion passes.
As Chair of the World Languages Subject Matter Committee, I move to approve the questions for the online survey that will be posted along with the draft framework when it is posted for the first 60-day public review and comment period scheduled from October 1st through December 1st, 2019.
Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
Thank you. Oh. Which one? Oh. Okay. Okay. Commissioner Naditz has moved and Commissioner Munoz has seconded this motion. Is there any discussion? Okay. Any public comment? Okay. Then I'd like to call for a vote at this time. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Then this motion passes. We're going to move on to health at this time.
Okay. I've got a long list here. As Chair of the Health SMC, I move to recommend to the State Board of Education IMR and CRE applicants 1, 37, 30, 11, 35, 62, 26, 45, 15, 67, 28, 58, 64, 18, 59, 49, 14, 7, 39, 9, 17, 19, 24, 12, 63, 16, 76, 36, 34, 40, 25, 56, 51, 47, 33, 2, 20, 65, 60, 73, 50, 61, 74, 6, 29, 71, and 75, 38, 57, and 66. CRE applicants 25, 11, and 19 are being recommended as IMRs because they lack the qualifications to serve as a CRE for this adoption.
Thank you. Is there a second to this motion? Second. Thank you so much. Commissioner Wu has moved and Commissioner Costa Hernandez has seconded the motion to recommend to the State Board of Education the IMR and CRE applicants as noted. Is there any discussion on this motion? Okay, any public comment? Okay, then I'd like to call for a vote at this time. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Then the motion passes. Thank you guys so much. That is our agenda for today, and I just want to open it up one last time for public comment if anybody would like to share anything. Thank you thank you so much, especially those of you who are with us the whole day today, and we will reconvene tomorrow. Adjourned.